Okay. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Is this working? Is this on? Okay, let me know if you can see me. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat. I can't quite tell. There's not a whole lot happening in the chat. There was a lot happening in the chat until I. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I am currently using this microphone, even though, even though I have this nice new microphone, which this one sounds a lot better than this one, but you probably won't notice the difference, but I'll notice. I had also set this thing up. I finally got everything working where I have a monitor here. I have a monitor here, which will show me script pages. So what we can do in future episodes is you can send in scripts and we can go through those scripts. I'll put it up on the screen, so you'll see a picture of the screen. You'll see the script, a little picture of me on the side, and we'll go through the script a lot like the old feedback loop episodes. Today, however, I don't know why, but it's not working. I went to go, so I have there's this live streaming software called Ecamm, which so I have an A10 Mini Pro, which does direct live stream. I have a Rodecaster Pro, which I have the microphone plugged into, which I tried to plug that into the A10 Mini, but you get this weird feedback noise, so it's not okay. So I have to put that into the computer. I have to put the A10 Mini into the computer. I bumped that, but you won't even hear that anyway because it's coming through that microphone. I have a monitor. I have a second monitor. I have a little monitor to make sure everything's good and the levels are good. I have the lights. I have the lights. I have all the stuff going. Wouldn't you know, I go to click go live, which is the same thing that happened last week. Now you might think, oh, Jeff, why didn't you test that in the meantime? Well, I did test that and it was working. So I don't know why it stopped working. I went to go live. It said there's a duplicate stream because I'd set up the thing. I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a thing like 10 o'clock, 10:30 this morning, whatever it was. I set up the stream so that you could get some sort of alert. I don't know if you actually got an alert. Let me know in the chat if you got an alert. To set up an alert to let you know that remind you that there's a live stream on today. But by having that pre-recorded live stream thing set up there, then when I went to go live, it, I guess, competed with that. It said there were two live streams. One was the pre-set up one, and one was the I want to go live right now thing. So I was like, do you want to switch over to that, or do you want to go with this? Either way, it said, oh, this account has not been enabled to live stream. And I'm thinking, okay. I mean, I did two of them already. This was going just fine. So I thought maybe the software is not talking to it. Anyway, that's when I said in the chat that this isn't working. And then I said, well, okay, as a last-ditch effort. Oh, and then it said, you will not be able to, you have to verify your phone number. So I verified my phone number, send me a little code from Google and all that. And then they said, yeah, okay, well, you have to wait 24 hours to do any live streaming. I'm like, what? Why? I've already done live streaming. So then I thought, well, why don't I get rid of that software and just go back to the A10 Mini, which is what I did last week, which is basically just to go straight out from this little switcher that I have this other little microphone plugged into. And at first I went go live and it went, live streaming is not available to you right now. And I went, this is not going to work out today. And then all of a sudden the thing pops up and here I am. So, why am I telling you this story? Other than the fact that it just happened to me and it's very frustrating and I don't know why, and I'm going to have to now spend all day tomorrow probably figuring this out so that this doesn't happen again. But today's idea for today's show, hello my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of the Screenwriting Show. Today's idea for the show was going to be screenwriting roadblocks, the roadblocks to your success. I wanted that what we could do is go through and talk about whatever roadblocks you are experiencing with your screenwriting. What are the big challenges you have? What are the big problems that you either perceive that you have or that you actually have? Anything from I can't figure out how to turn my idea into a story, to I can't get anybody to read my script, to I can't get an agent, to I can't sell anything, to I've been doing this for 20 years and I can't quite cross that hurdle. Let's try to figure out what your roadblocks are today so that we can cover those roadblocks and see if we can come up with some solutions to whatever roadblocks you have. It's kind of ironic that today's episode starts out with pretty much the ultimate roadblock to live streaming. You're not allowed to live stream for 24 hours. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Google. Thank you for your fascinating technology, which doesn't make any sense sometimes. You will be happy to know, or maybe won't even care, but since I decided to go down this road and start doing this live streaming thing, I've invested in monitors, I've invested in this equipment. This camera, for some reason, every so often, you might have noticed last week and the week before, if you're watching those, every so often, I don't know when, I don't know why, it just sort of like has this like stuttery thing that happens, like it's not happening right now, or at least the 15 seconds prior to the delay you're seeing while I'm looking at the monitor. But it will invariably happen at some point during this live stream. I don't know why that's happening either. I've Googled the heck out of it. I've YouTubed the heck out of it, and I can't, for the life of me, determine what's causing that. I think it may be the camera. This camera doesn't have it clean HDMI out. You probably don't know or care about any of this stuff, but it means that there's information on the back of the computer. It tells you like aperture settings and focus settings and all that stuff. When that goes to the computer, it still has that information, so I can't broadcast that because it'll have a little focus ring going around as I'm moving around. It'll be very distracting. So instead, what I've done is set this to a manual focus. So if I go back over here, I'll go out of focus, and if I come to, anyway, then it'll go out of focus again. So I'm sort of in focus in this one little spot right here. That way, I don't have any focus stuff, and I can turn everything else off, and you can actually see it. So this camera has some inherent limitations as a live streaming device. So I bought a new camera, which was supposed to arrive today, but will probably arrive tomorrow now, because that's what roadblocks are all about. So I'm sort of investing all this money and all this energy to hopefully show you, to take that leap of faith and say, we're going to make this show something truly, genuinely special. I have a volunteer with whom I am working to sort of map out the show and figure out how to assemble the content each week. And I've sort of mapped out what the show is going to look like. If you're new here or you don't remember what I said the past couple of weeks, these first few episodes, probably 1 through 4, are really about me learning how to live stream, me learning how to overcome the very problems that we had at the very start of this, which are going to prevent me from switching camera angles and stuff, which was going to be very cool today, and I was going to dazzle you. But alas, now I only have to dazzle you with my my verbiage. Anyway, point is, what is the point? Anyway, the point is that I have sort of poured this energy into making the show fantastic. We started mapping out what the episodes are going to be. Once I sort of figure this all out, once we get over the technical hurdles and figure that stuff out, which I want to talk about that in just a second. So put a pin in that, basically. Once I sort of overcome that stuff, then each episode of the show is going to be a deep dive into a different aspect of screenwriting. So I put together this list, and just sort of really quickly to throw a list together to her, I came up with about 60 or so episode ideas. I was like, I don't have time, so I'm sending this email prematurely. After sending that, I had probably another 30, 40 episode ideas. Now, episode ideas, topics that we're going to cover in this series, are what each show will be about. So it's things like suspense. We'll do a whole episode on a deep dive on suspense and how to build suspense and how to recognize suspense and how to identify your suspense and how to extract suspense out of your story, where it goes, where it doesn't go, mistakes writers make, how to improve, all that sort of thing. Things like tone, the tone of the story that you're writing. How do you recognize the tone? How do we improve the tone? Like, how do we make sure that the tone is consistent with the kind of story you're trying to tell? Things like dialogue, things like conflict, things like, there's a whole list of them. Let me see if I can go through. So we have things like revealing character. We have things like scene dynamics. We have things like world building, things like the marketability of the story or the marketing of you and your work. Two different shows. We can look into agents, we can look into managers, we can look into script competitions, we can look into script formatting details, do's and don'ts, all that kind of stuff. Log lines and how to develop hooks. Now think of each of these as a different show. So what we're going to do with this series in the months and probably years ahead is each week we're going to look at a different one of those topics. We're going to try to do a deep dive into that topic. Going to try to give you as much as I possibly can, as much as I can bring to it within sort of an hour or so. Answer questions that you have, address any pushback that you might have. You challenge me on anything, fine. We'll talk about it in the chat, and we'll really try to make it something powerful and helpful and immediately practical for you. So the idea for this show will be sort of one section of the show. Then we'll have sort of open discussion, a little bit like we're going to try to do here. I eventually am hoping to be able to do interviews with industry professionals that we can sort of add a unique flavor and insight to every episode. I would like to get into doing feedback where I can pull up your script or material that people have submitted, and we'll go through it, and I'll maybe get you on the phone. I don't know how the delay thing's going to work. We'll see how that'll work. That'll be another little issue that maybe I should probably try to test in the next week or two. I can test that off week between the episodes. But anyway, get to the point where we're actually doing feedback of your work so that you can start to see not just your own work, but other people's work, and how the principles work and how to build into it. One of the things that I've said many times over the years is that there are like 200 to 300 skills that you kind of need to do really well to do screenwriting at a professional level. And when I throw that out there, it's like, okay, that sounds mysterious. But those are the kinds of things that we're talking about: the suspense, the tension, the pacing, the plotting, the story development, the scene design, the character building, all that kind of stuff. If you've written a screenplay or you focused on writing screenplays and you really just sit down and sort of throw 100 pages together, have you actually kind of mastered the nuances of all that stuff? Do you have a story maybe that starts off really strong but just gets really slow and boring in the middle? I've seen that countless times in screenplay submissions, where a writer will maybe have a great idea, maybe start out with some interesting scenes that pull me into the story, but then like the middle just goes, it's just like, we're watching talking heads, and we're clearly filling out the middle as we try to get to whatever the conclusion or climax of that story is going to be. So making a story that works on all those levels is the way that you're going to actually create something that gets noticed and that people want to do. So what my goal for this show is to basically create that situation. So today I wanted to talk about screenwriting roadblocks, and what are the obstacles that you have. We have a bunch of people here. I'm always curious to know who's here this time and how many people we're going to get each week. Who knows? I can't tell. I think once we start getting into a really cool, consistent, ongoing rhythm for the show, I think it can be, this may turn into something. In the meantime, thank you guys who are here. Looks like we've got about 19 people here at the moment. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Let's participate. Throw me whatever obstacles you're facing, whatever roadblocks and challenges you have. One of the things that when you look at this live stream show and you think, okay, this is now the third week in a row with that, and that's it, me talking for 2+ hours. That's not quite as dynamic and as exciting as we want it to be. It's not as dynamic and exciting as I'm pitching it as, or as I'm suggesting that it will become. Here's the thing. I don't have a whole lot of time. One of the big challenges that writers always have, one of the biggest roadblocks, is time. We all say we don't have time to do the writing. We have a day job, maybe. We have family obligations. We just have very few hours in the day in which to do our work. Well, guess what? That's the same situation that I face right now. Putting together this live stream series, if I had my druthers, what I would love to do is just take 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is, and pour every single hour into making this whole thing work. But you know what? Sometimes you set it up and it doesn't work. The microphone's getting feedback into the other thing. Well, why is that? Why is that? I don't know why that is. So I have to go out and explore what is the problem here. Okay, maybe I need to call an electronics store and say, I'm having this problem. And they say, oh, you're using the wrong kind of cable. Oh, sure. Okay, it's the wrong kind of cable. So I go out and I buy the right kind of cable, plug it in, still having the problem. Or even worse, I'm having a completely different problem. And now I have to watch more YouTube videos. I have to talk to more techs. I have to buy more equipment. I have to move things around to try to figure out how to make this work. My point is this. The only way I can get this show up and running is by chipping away at it, little pieces of time each day. So the amount of time I have put into this to get us to what is essentially the same thing as 2 weeks ago, the first episode, I have poured a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money into making this thing work, and it's still not quite there. So when you think about screenwriting, when you think about the amount of time that you have each week to do it, don't think of it in terms of you have to finish the project by X date. You don't. At the end of the day, X date is an arbitrary time. If you have some script competition that you want to get in by the deadline, that's something great to aspire to. But there's no need to rush your project just because there's a deadline looming. There will be another deadline. There will be something else later after you've missed this deadline. The key is to keep chipping away at it, to keep taking a little bit of time, as much time as you can give it each day, so that you're continuously moving forward. I have now mostly everything that I need. I think I want to have another camera angle that makes things more visually exciting to you. I have the screen share that I can do. I have another screen share which is going to show your comments on the screen, which would be fantastic. We can actually interact more effectively. What else? We're going to have the better audio. All of these things are going to work. All of these things are going to happen. And I'm now much further along than I was on episode 1 2 weeks ago, for which I spent about 2 weeks getting ready. So I was going to be much further along at that point. But then I didn't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of hours to devote to it in the week in between. So by pouring the 10 or 12 cumulative, crunch them all together, but they're spread out over time, to put those 10 or 12 hours together to figure it out, to change the layout of the cabling and all that kind of stuff, right? If you think of it in terms of, if I thought of it in terms of, is this a failure today because I don't have it all working the way that I want to? Well, that can be very psychologically damaging. You can get very frustrated at your lack of progress. But if I think of it in terms of the little incremental improvements that I'm making, we're getting close to where we're going to be. I'm going to do another episode next week, which will probably be a little bit like this one. Hopefully, we'll have crossed that threshold and we'll be able to cut away to different things, and we'll be able to look at some of your writing and go through some of that and talk it through, maybe even have you call in and have your voice on the live stream as well. Hopefully, we will be prepared to do all that. Have the new camera, so we don't have any sort of stuttering camera, which every time I look over, it's not doing it. So I don't know, maybe it's working today. But we're going to do that for next week. Hopefully that'll be our last sort of pre-show episodes. We will skip the Thursday of July 1st because that's a long weekend and there's some family stuff going on. And then we'll come back and hopefully we'll be able to start doing the full episodes where we do deep dive topics on whatever that next Thursday is in July. The second Thursday of July, I think it is. Let me just pull that up to make sure. Yeah, come the 8th. So the 8th of July will probably be the first sort of official deep dive into a different topic each week kind of episode. My hope is to have some movie clips for you and example scripts that we can look through, talk through writers' work to give you some feedback as well. Just really give you sort of a home each week for the screenwriting thing. I know that most people who do the screenwriting thing are in a bit of an oasis. You're trying to write screenplays or be creative in some way, and the people around you are looking at you like, why are you wasting your time on this thing that's never going to happen? And I know that can be very frustrating. I know that can be dispiriting, and maybe even take away some of your enthusiasm and passion for actually doing it and following through with it. I can only tell you that from the perspective of the independent producer who's looking for material, who's always looking for that something special, we need writers to keep going. We need writers to develop those skills. And if I can be a positive, optimistic, cheering voice for you, helping you each week sort of see the opportunity here, dig into it, be with your peeps, and keep moving forward, then that's really what I'm going to try to do here. So let's have a look at, let's just have a quick look through the chat and see what everyone had to say. Victoria says, is it possible for you to take out one of your old scripts and point out changes you should have made from a producer's perspective? I would like you to critique your work as a writer and producer. Well, yeah, I could probably do something like that. I would rather work on your stuff because it's been a long time since I've done the writing thing personally, because my focus has been on building the film studio and building the mechanism that will feed the film studio. And so I suppose we could try to do, I think it would be more beneficial or more helpful if I help you with it's a little hard for me to be objective about my own work because I often look at my own work and I go, that's great. And I don't know if it's really great, but it's a little hard for that objectivity to happen. We might be able to try it. Let me see what I can do. I'll see if I can find some old scripts. There might be something. Well, that's an interesting idea. I'll be super harsh on myself, and then that way that'll show you that I'm objective in my critiques. Let's see. Hello from London. Hi, Jasmine from London. Adriana, before anything, should I look for an agent first to sell my script, or I can do my own? So agents represent writers. Agents exist to represent professional writers. So in order for an agent to want to take you on board, they're going to need to not only see, but believe that you will be a source of revenue for them, because their job is to represent you, not really just to sell your script. Technically, I mean, sort of in a way, but their job is to represent the writer and get the best deal for them. If you've written something that really can't get a deal or is not really viable yet, then there's really nothing for them to sell. If you've written one project that may be viable or low budget or mid-level budget, they're not going to see a whole lot of money from that. So they need to know that you would be able to be good in a room to pitch a new project, or be able to take on a writing assignment that they would get their commission on, or that you probably have other projects in you that would be commissionable at some point. So agents are, the agent's job is really reliant, their income, their revenue source is really reliant upon how good, how effective the writer is. So that's not really a one project kind of thing. If your one project is viable, you could go direct to a producer or production company. Not that they will accept your submission, but that's another challenge. If you were able to make a deal, you met somebody at a cocktail party and you pitched the project and they went, oh my God, that's great. Let me see your script. And they go, wow, this is awesome. I want to make it. Well, then you could go to an agent and say, I need you to represent me in the negotiation of this, and they would be more likely to take you on board at that point. And then that could possibly lead to a longer term relationship, but it's not necessarily a lot of writers think, well, I've already done all the work. Why should they get a cut out of that? Well, they get a cut because they're doing the negotiation for you. I don't know what I can do on my own means. Do you mean that you're going to sell your script on your own, or that you're going to negotiate the deal on your own? I would not recommend for writers to be their own negotiator, because by definition, a negotiation is a slightly adversarial process, because you want to get the best deal for you, the writer, and the producer wants to get the best deal for them, the producer. So if you're going to be entering a creative partnership, a writer and a producer together to make the film, you don't really want to be like butting heads and fighting with each other over deal points as two creatives, because that could then create animosity that would affect the creative partnership. So this is one of the major reasons why you want an agent sort of act on your behalf, because then the agent can go, I want these deal points or whatever, and then the producer can be like, your agent is like a jerk, and you go, I know, he's such a tough negotiator. Meanwhile, you're like, yeah, stick it to you, So it's so anyway, it's probably best not to do it on your own, but it kind of depends on you and the situation and the producer and all that kind of stuff. This is where I had my streaming problems. Let's see. Doing well. Hi, Jeff. I've learned so much from this channel. I've spent 5 years learning, and then I put my first script out. It got noticed straight away. Fantastic. That's from RM. Congratulations on that. When you say it got noticed straight away, what sort of, how did it get noticed? What'd you get? Let me know. We'll come back to it because I didn't respond to that right away. So let's see. It's not for me to say that. Okay. I've heard it's best to have at least 2 killer screenplays before approaching any agency. Best to connect with a producer who might be looking for stories similar to yours, from Shane. Yeah, that's something that I do. I believe you should have 3 great scripts before you approach an agent for representation, just sort of strictly purely. If you're coming with a deal already, or you're coming with some potential deal, then you might not necessarily need 3 scripts right up front. But look, at the end of the day, you want to be able to demonstrate that you're ready for whatever is thrown at you, or you're ready for most screenwriting revenue. Most money that screenwriters will make comes not from a spec script sale, but from an assignment. So a producer has an idea, a director has an idea, a producer has an idea for a director and a writer, or a director and an actor, and they go, I have this great idea, I need to find a screenwriter. And your script that they read and they loved, but there's no chance they would ever make that, but they loved it, they thought you were really, come on in, let me know how you would handle this story idea. You could make the pitch, you could talk about it, whatever. And then they would hire you, or more and more, they would have you go off and just go write something. And then basically from that, if you get a writing assignment from that, they go hire you to write a first draft or just an outline, whatever it might be. Then that's how most screenwriters are generating most of their revenue. There are I don't know an actual percentage, but there are a lot of professional screenwriters who have made 6 figures plus a year who have never actually seen their name on the screen, because they're great writers. They're great in the room. For whatever reason, the projects that they're writing don't go all the way. And so it's very easy for a project to get derailed somewhere along the way. So you can't take that personally. It really has to become about having the skills to be able to do that kind of work. So that's one of the reasons why you want to have lots of writing samples. So it's not just, if you wrote one great script, but, can you do it again? We don't really know. There will be a hesitancy to sort of pushing for you in that way. So, let's see, Brad, should we stick around and see? Oh, you're talking about my streaming problems. A couple conversations with one another. Dimitri says, working on my 3rd script of the year at the moment. Record for me. Your videos were and still are a great help. Fantastic. For those of you that are new to the channel, I've got some 80 plus hours, I think. I don't actually know. That was the last I remember of videos on this channel on all sorts of topics. This series will probably get more into the practical stuff. Up until this point, I have tended to talk on this channel about some of the big picture stuff and some of the broad strokes kind of things. I've always been a believer that just teaching you stuff from here, ideas, techniques, principles, has limited value, because if you don't have the process in which to actually apply those principles, then it's going to be just more information in your brain causing you to go, I've got too many things to think about and I don't know how to implement this stuff. So because I built that process that really guides you through it, I've always believed that's the better way to do it. So I've been very hesitant to get too into the specifics on the channel. That's kind of going to change with this show. I really want to get into specifics. I really want to get into practicalities and tips and techniques and strategies and all that kind of stuff. In part because at the end of the day, whether you join me or not, writers need to know this stuff, and I'm not going to be able to make a movie with everyone in the world, so why not put the stuff out there? And hopefully you'll like it, and some percentage of you will want to join me on the adventure. But my point is that moving forward, I think we're going to start to see a lot more specific help and guidance on that. So if you liked what's come up so far, we've got some cool stuff coming further. Making a movie is hard. Yes, thanks for the challenge. Thanks, Ray. Michael says, I'm still in post-production for a short film I shot in 2017. Michael, a man after my own experience. Let's see. Michael says, why do I say this? Because all the challenges I faced during production are now giving me a whole set of roadblocks for the feature I'm trying to write now. So, Michael, I'm curious if you're still here. The roadblocks you face during the production of the short film the challenges you face during the short film are giving you roadblocks for the feature you're trying to work on. Is it because the lessons that you've learned from the short film have now made you gun shy a little bit on the feature, or you're trying to create scenarios in which you're going to sidestep some of the problems that you've had before? The reason I ask is because for those who've already heard this, I apologize for repeating myself, but I tried to make a little indie film with a friend of mine. We started in 1998. We ended up abandoning the project in 2005. We spent about 7 years on it. We got about 85% of the way completed. And because it took us so long, we had so many problems and so many challenges. We shot on Super 16. We shot weekends and evenings and spread out the shooting over a year or so. We were editing it on a flatbed. It was the time when nonlinear editors were the video editing systems were finally becoming the nonlinear machines we could have bought at the time were like $10,000. We just didn't have the money for that, so we cut it on flatbed, which was fantastic. You're actually cutting the strips of film and then splicing them together, and then you watch it back and you go, oh no, we need to take a couple more frames off of here and splice it. Fantastic way to do it, to learn. But it just took forever. And my ambition for the story was to do it quickly, just to knock the thing out and move on to the next project. And my partner's ambition for the project was to make it this cinematic masterpiece. And so, it ended up being better than it probably would have been otherwise, but because it took us so long, the whole thing just didn't really make sense in 2005. It was really a story for the mid to late 90s, and it wasn't really a period piece enough now for that time to make that work, and it doesn't work. So I ended up having... I ended up being really gun shy about making the next project because I wanted to make sure to avoid a lot of these kinds of problems so that we're not sort of stuck trying to reach for perfection on something that doesn't really need it. But at the same time, we learned a lot. And I would say taking an idea from that spark of an idea in my head through the entire screenwriting process, admittedly shorter and not as well-defined as what I teach now, I found a couple of books and I sort of followed what the book said. And yeah, I was a little formulaic and it didn't quite really work out, but it was not bad. But we never finished it. And so it really did have an impact on what we tried to do from that point on. But you can't let that stop, you know, you can't let that, he says, correct. I'm trying to sidestep any future problems, but yes to all that you mentioned. So the reality is every project you produce, every script you write, every story you go about trying to tell is going to have its own unique set of problems. There are some principles, there are some lessons and insights you can learn and glean from the project that you did that will be universal to every project you do. Things like how to schedule it or how to just sort of best practices of putting it together. The process itself of writing, one of the reasons I built a process-based approach to screenwriting is because it's not about what you put where on which page of your story. It's about going from point A to point B. It's about gathering those ideas and focusing them into a story, getting that on the page, rewriting until it's solid, tweaking, polishing until it's a page turner experience, and then testing that to make sure it's landing the way you want it to. That process is always going to be the same. So similarly with making short films or making feature films, the process will always be the same. So take those kinds of lessons and whatever roadblocks or challenges you had during that part of the process, but don't take too long waiting, because you're going to find that your need for, I guess, making it all perfect and getting it right and avoiding some of the biggest challenges and headaches and heartaches, your attempt to avoid that stuff will be futile, because when you do jump back into it finally, inevitably at some point, you will find that certain problems are always there. Certain problems will be endemic to the process. So if you wait to try to make everything perfect, you're going to kind of be waiting forever. Expect imperfection and move forward knowing it will not be perfect. Be prepared to learn the same lesson multiple times. I've done a lot of films over the years, short films and corporate films and my own films and all that. And there are some lessons that you just learn again and again and again, or problems that keep recurring again and again and again. I'm not sure you can avoid some of that stuff, so don't let it keep you from taking action on the next project or the current projects. Vazio says, how's it going? First time I'm able to catch an episode. Well, considering that I have this whole setup here to do something quite different to what I'm doing now, and it didn't work, I'm doing okay. I would prefer to be cutting away to script examples and cutting away to things where everyone can see on the video feed the comments and all that. But other than that, it's all good. As long as you guys are cool with what this is at the moment, everything's good. So let's see. Shane says, my roadblocks are fear-based. I'm afraid to put my work out there because I'm afraid of making a bad first impression. I want the script to be amazing, and it always falls short. So here's the thing. Perfection is a myth. I know you've heard me say this before, Shane, but I'm going to, who knows? Maybe this time it'll land. It probably won't, because it's just the nature of fear. It's sort of something that we always have to encounter. Perfection is a myth. The thing that you want, if you're afraid of making a bad first impression, what you're doing is you're putting the other person's reaction above your objective. Your objective is not to get a good reaction. Your objective is to take the reader on a visceral story. So if you get a bad, quote unquote, bad impression, if you get negative feedback, then that bad impression, that negative feedback is simply information. It's simply data, which you can then use to improve your work. Think of it this way. We all have ideas for movies. When that idea is floating around in our head, it's amazing, it's awesome, we love it, fantastic. right? This is going to be the best movie ever. Soon as you start writing it out, it's like, on the page, these black and white words, it's not quite as awesome as it was in my head. The reality is, if it's not as awesome as it was in your head, all you have to do is go back and adjust it until it is as awesome as it was in your head. Now, if you're brand new to writing, that may take a little time. You may have to develop the skills. You may have to learn the techniques and the dynamics that make a piece of writing effective or ineffective, right? So it's going to take a little time to improve that. When you send your work, once you've got it to what you think is great or you think is okay, and then you send it out for feedback, it's possible that someone will read it and not see in your words what you see in your words. They're coming out of your head. You're naturally biased. You're naturally going to see your own writing in a subjective way. You're going to interpret it with all the hidden things, what I call what's outside the frame, right? I'm sure I've used this before for people who follow closely, but in cinematography, when you line up a shot, you figure out what's in the frame and you want to make sure that you fill the frame. But don't worry about what's outside the frame. When we're making the movie, let's say a character walks in through a door, and as they walk in through a door, they smile. Well, if on the way through that door, they trip, they smile, and then they drop whatever it is they're holding and it smashes and we have to take 10 minutes to clean everything up. Well, if you can use everything up to that point, it's still going to be effective. You can't look at that take and say, oh, we can't use that take because he dropped the thing. You have to look at the take and see what's in the frame. Have we filled the frame with what the story is going to be? And it's hard to, when you're actually there making a film, when you're actually there as part of the production, all the things that are happening outside of what the camera is seeing are part of what you see. It's part of what you remember and understand about the filmmaking experience. So all of that stuff is part of your memory. When you watch a film back, you watch a scene, you're not just going to remember what's in the scene. You're going to remember all the things around the scene, and that's going to change how you feel about the movie or the scene. Similarly, when you write, you had a whole thing in the scene with a side conversation with the mother, right? Well, you've cut that out now because you wanted to tighten it up or whatever. But now as you read through that scene, you always remember the mother there. You're like, it's always going to be subjective in that way. The fear that we have is that the person who's reading it is going to not see it or think it's not very good quality or not understand it or whatever. They're going to think it's bad. There's no such thing as bad. There really is no such thing as bad. There's only effective or ineffective. Has what you've written, is it effective in accomplishing what you set out to accomplish? If yes, then it's good. If no, then it's bad. But don't use bad or good. That's a judgment. That stops the creative process. If you look at something or you get some feedback and it's negative, the person doesn't like your script, they don't like your character, they don't like your writing style, then okay, why not? What is the problem? What don't they like about it? Then you can look to that and ask yourself, is this something that I want to improve? Is this something that I think is good, even if they don't think it's good? Is this what I wanted to say? Does this serve my thematic point or purpose or not? And so ultimately, the fear that we have is it comes from a misunderstanding of the process. It comes from your worry of being judged, but it's not about being judged. It's about telling the story. It's about getting the story out and having that impact upon the reader, upon the audience eventually. So if you have, if you change the way you perceive that, then you're going to at least keep moving forward. A bad first impression can be overcome. Do not ever believe the myth that It's all about the first impression. First impression is last. Well, that's true until you make a better impression and erase the first impression because they like the new impression that you made. Human beings are adaptable, so don't fear. Don't not write out of fear. Writing is a process. It takes time and it's iterative. You write something bad, you send it out, you get negative feedback. Well, then guess what? You use that to improve your work. You send it out again. You're going to eventually get good feedback because you're listening to what the reader does and doesn't like about your story, deciding whether it's appropriate for what you're trying to say, and incorporate it as needed. So hopefully that makes sense. Jocelyn says hello. Hello, Jocelyn. Dimitri retracted his message. Bummer. I want to know what that was. Tobias says, I had a director and producer some years back who liked my script, but it needed 8 rewrites until my script was no longer anything like the original I had written. This is what screenwriting is all about. It still did not get made. Is that normal in the industry? Yes. So this goes back to my basic core discovery and one of the unique things that I bring to the screenwriting discussion, which is this idea of alignment. I really genuinely believe that at the end of the day, it's not about whether what you write is good or bad. It's not about whether what you write is right or wrong. It's about, is it aligned with the team who will be making the film? So almost every project you sell, unless somehow you happen to just nail it and the people who read your script and want to make the film love every nuance of it so much that they want to make exactly that project, and they have the resources as well and the elements. Unless that situation happens, which I don't have a percentage on it, but my gut would tell me that it's probably 10% of projects at most that would fit that description. Unless that's the case, there will always be rewrites needed. So if you write a script and let's say we just go out and we love it, we want to make that project, but then casting is like, we just can't find anyone who is able to hit the nuances. No actor that's able to hit the nuances of what we read in the script. Actors tend to read it maybe a different way, right? So if you can't get an actor to say the line the way that you imagine it to be said, if you can't get an actor to see the same vision that the director sees, and you're limited on time and money and resources, you might have to change the script to adjust to the realities of production. Rewriting lines in a way that this particular actor can say, or rewriting a scene based upon what location you were actually able to secure, right? So maybe you imagined a scene in a sort of big shopping center, but getting that big shopping center, finding enough extras, all that stuff was just, we couldn't quite make that happen. So what we could do is a warehouse where there's nobody working. Okay, so how can we adapt the scene? Well, the dynamics of this scene were playing off the fact that there were all these people in the background, and now we don't have that. So how do we get the same effect, or how can this new world or this new environment make the same impact as what that scene made to the overall story? Maybe it can't. So how does that change? Remember that ball of yarn example we used last week? Pull this string and this sort of unravels over here. So how does that now affect the other parts of the story? There are so many moving parts. And the one thing that I think screenwriters in general maybe don't take into consideration enough is that you are part of a team. You're part of a film production team. When you're writing a project you're sitting at home, you have an idea and you sit down to write it, it doesn't feel like you're a part of a team. But if the film is to get made, well, there will be a team at some point and you are part of that team. And that necessarily means adjusting to what we don't have, or sometimes what we do have. Maybe the thing that you imagined is not even as strong or powerful as the team you have. You've got a cinematographer who is able to make magic happen with lighting, and so you're in that warehouse, but somehow the warehouse just takes on this spiritual, ephemeral sort of vibe with the lights and the shadows, and suddenly now it says something completely different to what that originally written scene was, but this is so powerful in its own right. That's going to be on the poster, this new thing. Like, you're part of that. You're going to get credit for writing that, even though you didn't really write that, right? Or this is why it's so hard to judge the writer based on the final film. You have to judge them based on the final script that they submitted. So anyway, a little bit of a roundabout point to say, 8 rewrites is nothing. It's depending on budgets and depending on what people need and the realities of that situation, those kinds of changes will often happen. And if they're trying to convey notes to you that you interpret differently to what they actually want, or if in the rewrites you sort of lose it a bit and we have to try to come back, and if you're not good at that part of the business, well, it's very easy for those relationships to go askew and for the deal to fall apart. Not to say that it's the writer's fault. Very often, in my case specifically, I've worked with a writer who we thought we were going to be able to get money for the project. We did some rewrites on a project. It didn't quite work out, but really, I also probably was not able at the time to effectively convey what I needed, and it fell apart, and the investor got cold feet, and that was the end of that. So sometimes it's them, sometimes it's you. A lot of things have to come together to make it work. So don't be afraid of the rewrites, and don't worry too much if it doesn't end up getting made. It's about continuing to move forward until you get that deal, until it is made. Let's see. Shane says, another roadblock, trying to find the perfect idea to work on to break in has me jumping from idea to idea with lots of second guessing and doubting myself and the story. So, okay, so that one's a little easier roadblock to overcome. That roadblock is you trying to second guess the market. And I'll tell you right now, you're never going to second guess the market. If you hear through the grapevine, oh, sci-fi films are all the rage right now, or horror is making a big comeback, or westerns are suddenly en vogue, or whatever. The time it takes to make a film, the time it takes to get a film into production in the first place, let alone making the film and then ultimately distributing the film, it's going to be a year, 2, 5, before the film that you have the idea for today gets out there. Maybe if you make little low budget stuff or micro budget stuff, you can write stuff and pump it out quickly. But I mean, this stuff takes time. So the perfect idea is a myth. It's a misnomer. What you want to do is find the project that you're most passionate about. What are you trying to say? Like, ultimately, when we're trying to figure out the best way to break in, you're not actually writing from a truly honest, authentic, creative place. You're not writing from your heart. You're writing from some sort of strategic business thinking. And that's just not going to work. I teach screenwriting from the producer's perspective. So it may seem like I'm all about figure out what the producer wants and then write something that the producer can actually use, which is part of the dynamic of it. But ultimately, I fundamentally believe that this business is a hybrid of art and commerce. There's this notion of art versus commerce, which is the most important thing. And it's really a blend of the two, because screenwriting is so complex and is so expensive, and there's so many moving parts in it that it takes a lot of resources to create something. So that necessarily, because so many resources have to go into it, to recoup the money to be able to keep doing this means we have to sell a lot of tickets, right? We have to tell this story widely, which means there is a little bit of a commercial imperative, especially as budgets grow. Little budgets, not so much. Big budgets, definitely so. So ultimately, if you're thinking about the economics of it, if you're thinking about the business side of it, and that's what's driving you, you're not going to create what the product actually is. The product that we're creating is an emotional, visceral, immersive, vicarious experience for the audience. Someone turning on the TV or going into the cinema and watching this thing and immersing into this story, falling in love with the characters, going along for the ride, seeing what happens, seeing where it goes, and wanting to know the outcome. For that to happen, we have to have some sort of emotional connection to it. It has to resonate in some way. We have to like it. We have to want to be a part of it. And I really believe that you can't manufacture that in some sort of robotic is the wrong word, but that's the one that's coming to my head. Some robotic sort of way, right? This is why I'm against the story formulas as a matter of musts. You don't have to follow a formula. And in fact, following a formula will often take away the very unique magic sauce that makes a movie truly powerful, something that we can invest in. When you're telling a story, you're in some ways trying to connect with the deeper truth of existence, of humanity, of what you've experienced in your life. You've experienced some triumphs, some heartache, some unique situations, some challenges. You've experienced things, and you know when something is truthful or when something is authentic as it relates to the things that you've experienced, right? So that's what we need to inject into our stories. It's not just about point A to point B and character goes through and twist happens and then inciting incident and, the gates of hell and all that kind of, it's not about that stuff specifically. The reason those things are there and the reason those things exist when they work is because going through that experience can be something that gives the audience a visceral experience. Going through that journey takes us on an emotional ride. But if that emotional ride is manufactured, if it feels fake, if it feels like, here comes the plot twist, because this is where the plot twist is supposed to go in the story, and we can project it, we can see it coming, well, guess what? It's no longer emotional. It's no longer authentic to us. So I know this is a very roundabout way of getting to your roadblock, but finding the perfect idea is finding the idea that's right for you. What are you passionate about? What do you want to say to the world? What is it that what do you care about? What do you want the world to care about? What kind of story engages you or pulls you in or is something that you love and you want to be a part of making this kind of a story? Do you love rom-coms? Who cares that rom-coms are not en vogue, right? Who cares what the market thinks of that? If you tell an authentic rom-com that touches into your unique window on the world, well, guess what? That is going to have an impact on people. If you tell it effectively, if you use the dynamics of storytelling and all that stuff that we talked about earlier, attention and pacing and plotting and all, if you really nail those skills and those details, and you are able to use them in service of this authentic idea that you're passionate about, that's going to be the thing that's going to resonate with the reader, because as we read it, we will hook into the authenticity of it. Authenticity is a much overlooked aspect to all this. And so much of the industry does not have that as a concern. And I think that's one of the things that makes audiences disconnect from movies and storytelling. And I think it's one of the things that makes that gives writers such a difficult challenge to get into the story. So hopefully that makes sense. I noticed I skipped over Roland, who said, how do you make the tone of the script stand out in the first pages? Well, that's a very specific... let me think on that one, because you're going to want to set the tone with how you express the story and the ideas on the page. So if something is a comedy and you want it to be light, not only is what's happening in the scene going to have to be light and effervescent. I don't know why that word popped in my head, but not only that, but the writing itself, the words you use, how you lay the words out on the page, all of that is going to have to be in service of that tone that you're trying to get across. If it's dark and brooding, you're going to want to use dark and brooding imagery, right? The things that are happening in the story need to be dark and brooding. You can't just be describing something in a dark and brooding sort of way. You want the action to be dark and brooding to establish that tone. So, let me give that one some thought and try to figure out the best way to express how to do that. We'll do an episode on tone. I don't know when. We're still mapping out the details of the thing. But one of the things that I want to do for this show is when we do the deep dives into specific topics, I'm going to take an idea like that and we're going to do a whole bunch of research. So I'm going to just sort of flesh out what I would naturally say about it, and then we're going to do some research and dig deeper into that topic so that when I do the live stream, we can really go into that. You can ask these kinds of questions. I'll have some more specific answers for you. And then we're going to take that afterwards and turn it into something. So it's a whole, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how to start. So, you don't necessarily want to be over, you don't want to hit it too on the nose, right? You don't want to hit the reader over the head with your tone, though. So you have to be kind of subtle about these things. Subtlety in screenwriting is a lost art, and I really think it's the thing that makes all the difference. And trying to help you understand that through teaching writing style is not really the way I go about teaching it. I sort of take you through a whole process that does it naturally. But here on this kind of a show and what we're building with this will be about specifically digging into those topics. So I'm going to have to take what's sort of intuitive in my system and turn it into some specific detailed ideas and tips for you along the way through this. So we will come back to that. If you stick around, make sure to click subscribe so that you're here when that episode comes along. Dimitri tried to answer. By knowing your genre and knowing the protagonist's flaws, you go into the writing by knowing both, which affects the tone. Well, so yes, but tone is not just genre or about tone is separate to character, and tone is they have an interconnected relationship, but tone is its own thing. It's its own dynamic. You can write a horror film where it's written in such a way, the events unfold in such a way that it's hilarious, and so it becomes a dark comedy, right? So tone is not so you can have a vicious character, but maybe he stumbles with what he does, right? So that's what you're talking about with the protagonist's flaws. But it doesn't have to be the protagonist, and it doesn't have to be that example either. It can be in relation to this. You can have a vicious character, but we're still telling it in a way that is tonally disconnected with what's happening there, right? That can be a very intentional, deliberate thing. So there's a lot more nuance to it than just that, but I agree in principle with sort of where you're going with that. Shane is talking about talking about Tobias's earlier comment about production. Let's see. Okay, so thanks for being very clear. That's great. Thank you. Correct. I'm trying to sidestep any problems. Oh, yeah. See, Roland, you're welcome. The tone of your script will stand out immensely as you write with the genre and the dilemmas in mind. Yeah, we'll talk more about that as we go. Tobias says, I've always wanted to write period scripts, but have been advised not to do so, mainly World War I related. Cost too much, costumes, etc. Okay, so yes and no. If your passion is, if that's your passion, I would actually say it's maybe a good idea to actually write one. Because if it's your passion, if it's the thing that you say you've always wanted to do, then chances are the story that you're going to tell is going to have more emotional resonance. It's going to be something that's more profound or impactful, and it'll serve as a better writing example, even if it can't get made. See what I'm saying? So on some level, you want to think, if you're thinking business-wise, you're thinking strategic career-wise, you want to be thinking in terms of writing samples and in terms of films to actually get produced. Initially, you want to write writing samples. You want to write, of course, we all hope that we're going to write something that gets produced, but to get noticed, more often you will write something that gets produced after you're already in meetings and relationships with people. The going from spec to sale is very rare. It's probably more rare today because if you think about if you think about low budget or even no budget stuff, or a lot of the sort of production driven stuff, we have this camera, we have this location, we've got these actors, let's make a movie, guys, right? That's sort of the sort of low budget ethos, right? Well, those people are going to make a story with what they have. So if you, the writer, can be a part of that, well, then you can really take those elements and turn it into something that would be way beyond what, if you've developed those skills to tell stories, that would be way beyond what a camera guy or actor or director might naturally think of, because they're thinking about shots, or the actor's thinking about performance, or the cinematographer's thinking about the lighting. You as the writer are thinking about the story and the connection between the scenes and the thematic interconnectedness with the dialogue and the right? Like, you're thinking about the story stuff. And so in some ways, writing a spec for someone to make as a low budget film is like, well, we love your story, but we don't have access to that kind of a house, or we would need a bus. We don't have a bus, right? Again, it depends on budget levels, but the thinking, the idea, the understanding of the dynamics of what we're trying to do are true at all budget levels, where when you write something on spec and we go, we love that story, we have to come to you to make the story that you've written. What people in this industry often like to do, and who can blame them, is work collaboratively to create a story that incorporates their imagination and the limited resources they might have. And all of that stuff, if that can contribute to the stories, then that's going to be a better way to get a movie made. Now, as a writer, how do you get into that situation? How do you become a part of that environment? Well, partly you're going to want to have writing samples that show what you can write, that show you can write at different budget levels, or whatever it is, whoever it is that you're trying to connect with. And you're going to need to have the skills to be able to take what they have and turn it into something as well. So, writing a period script or World War I project, yeah, it's going to be expensive because you have all the period costumes, you have the locations, which a lot of that can be cheated today. You can do a lot with computer graphics and all that kind of green screening or whatever. You'd be surprised what you can do. Some of the big budget stuff that everyone always advised against writing even 15 years ago, you could absolutely do today on a minuscule budget. So I wouldn't rule out those kinds of things. But beyond that, if you're passionate about it, then it's going to give you the fuel to actually get good at developing the skills you need to write in the other kinds of environments. So, hopefully, if you want to follow up on that, then post a comment below and we'll come back to it. The Sweet Idiot says, you mentioned when you reached out to those few scripts that demonstrated skills and effectiveness that the writers were not willing to compromise their visions. Okay. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but what I think you might be referring to is when I started looking for screenplays, we put out a call across Australia and started looking for scripts, and hundreds of scripts came in. I committed to reading them all because I know how challenging the craft is. Over the years, I ended up looking at about 30,000 project submissions, read about 7,000 screenplays. So somebody would submit something, they'd submit a log line. I got to the point where I could tell from a log line if it was something that I didn't want to do. So they would submit a log line. If I thought, we'll see, maybe this could go somewhere, or ooh, I like this idea, and anywhere along that spectrum, I would say, send me a synopsis. So they would send me a one-page synopsis, which is their story in one page. And I could tell from the one page if this was going to be what I wanted it to be, or if it was going to go off in some other direction, or if the writer clearly does not quite have the chops to be able to deliver in a long form. So from the synopsis, I would ask to read the script if I thought there was any remote chance, because I also know writing well enough and know writers well enough to know that you might suck at writing log lines. You might be terrible at writing one-page synopses, but your screenplay might actually be not too bad. So I would always give people the benefit of the doubt. If it was like, let's see, then I would read it. So that way, I read about 7,000 scripts. I'd say, send me the script. Let me have a look. Invariably, without fail, my initial instinct was always right. So that's not to say anything about me. That's to say that the log line and how well you can write a log line, and then even more importantly, how well you can write that one-page synopsis, are genuinely indicative of how effective your writing skills are, how likely it is that you're going to be able to write a screenplay that does what it promises. So in the end, we found, I think it was 26. I'm going to go with 26. I always say it's either 26 or 28. I can't remember honestly which one it was, but there were like 26 projects that I found over the years, over a span of decade and a half, that I thought, this is something that I would like, after reading the script, this is something that I would like to option. Not always because we could use it as is, but because this is something that I would like to make. I think we can get it to where we need it to be without too much additional heavy lifting. And every time I reached out to those people, it's not that they were not willing to compromise their vision. It's that those projects were already optioned somewhere else by the time I found them. It would usually take me anywhere from 6 months to sometimes 18 months to go through all the submissions, because I'm doing it as I can. I would bring in people from time to time to sort of go through some of the stuff. It's hard. It's time consuming. It's money consuming if you're bringing in other people to go through all the submissions and train people. This is what I'm looking for, but let this through, don't let this through, right? Or just taking the time to go through all those submissions. And by the time you finally do, and you go through the back and forth of it, sometimes I would request a synopsis, but it's not until 6 or 7 months later before I finally get a chance to read the script. Well, in that time, they've probably gone around and said, so-and-so is looking at my project to other production companies, which would make them go, oh, really? Let me see it. Oh, yeah, I'll take that. But in the end, I just couldn't find material because of that. So I hope that's the elaboration you're asking for. If you have something else, I'm not sure. I don't see any follow-up comments from you. So I'm not sure if you're still here, Sweet. I'll call you Sweet rather than Sweet Idiot, but I like the screen name. So no, I haven't necessarily reached out to writers who are unwilling to compromise their vision. That's not true. I have mostly through writing workshops and interacting with writers in this kind of environment. That's when you find people that are not willing to compromise their vision. Or when we say we're going to try to make little low budget films initially, people are often unwilling to compromise their visions, which is fair enough. And to me, that's just, writers often have an idea in their head of what their movie is going to be, and they've written the screenplay that reflects the movie that it's going to be. And if anyone comes in and wants to make something other than the movie that it's going to be, no, right? That's not really how it works. There's too many moving parts. It's a collaborative process. You could get out on the day of shooting and you just can't get the actor to say the word correctly without stuttering, and so you can't get that line. So you have to change that line. What do? It's the nature of the beast. So when you're writing, don't think in terms of my masterpiece. Think in terms of the blueprint for the production process. What is the thing that is going to put the movie that I see in the mind of the creative people who will be a part of my team? That's the key. It's not about are you going to be able to make this movie? It's about, I want this movie to be in the imagination of that super talented director, of that super talented actor, of that super talented cinematographer, that super talented editor, because they're then going to take that idea and add their own creative juice to it. They're going to add their own skills and their techniques that they've learned over the last 20 years or whatever, and make your black and white words on the page, which represent an idea, a story that you have fully fleshed out in your mind, but they're just black and white words on the page. They're going to make that into something real and something powerful. So hopefully that makes sense. Tobias says, yes, it was my first option, an option which was unpaid. Oh, when you did the 8 rewrites. So I too have done options that are unpaid with writers. I always feel a little bad about it, but as a low budget independent producer, you don't always have the I don't have $3,000 or $5,000 just to be paying out to every writer for an option on a project that I don't know that we can actually get up to speed. So if it's a project that I think can be made as is right now, maybe for where I have been at, that's always been a big ask, and just throwing, $3,000 or $5,000 out there. I mean, imagine yourself doing that. Anyone who's watching, that's a tough thing. The bigger producers, the ones with, who have had big successes in the past, usually have funds for that kind of thing, but they need to know that you're going to be able to do those 8 drafts, and the two of you will be able to come to that place. So the producer's always going to want to do the lowest price option possible, and the writer's always going to want the most. What I always would do is if I had a $1 option or a low priced option, I would always try to keep the time frame to a minimum, so that if I couldn't get it together for the writer, they'd be able to have those rights back. If you ever get a $1 option offer from somebody, just make sure they don't have any more than 6 months, 12 if you really think they can make it happen. Anything beyond that, that's asking too much on the part of the producer. If it's anything less than a 1-year option, it's a judgment call, but anything more than a 1-year option is you should be getting some money for not being able to shop your project around elsewhere. So anyway, side rant there. What software do you use for this? OBS makes screen sharing pretty easy. Yes, I have Ecamm, which is very easy as well, but for some reason it wasn't talking to YouTube today. So Ecamm's actually, I've tried OBS, which is very clunky in my opinion, but the Ecamm, I've used it in the past and it just didn't, it wasn't great, but we'll get there. I might try OBS this coming week and see. I'll make this better. Don't worry, we'll get there. I appreciate your patience while it's just me talking to you on a screen. Tobias says, I've had readers love a script and others who have hated the same script. Does become confusing. Well, this is why you always have to, this is why my opinion is, when you think in terms of feedback, always think in terms of aggregate feedback. Think in terms of consensus, not one person's opinion. Every single human being on the planet has a different perspective on our world. Every single one of us. We see things differently. We have different political leanings. We have different experiences. Some scene that you write could cut really close to home for some writer and make them just hate your script because that scene made me uncomfortable because it reminded me of my childhood. You can't control that kind of a thing. But if you send it to 10 people, one person has that has that reaction, but the other 9 are like, I didn't have a problem with that scene. Well, then imagine if you had changed that scene because you only got feedback from that one person. So that's why the way that I teach it in Fast Screenplay is we have this whole phase, the alignment phase, where it's all about getting notes from a wide variety of sources, figuring out the aggregate consensus opinions, and deciphering what they're really saying. It's hard also to understand if somebody says they don't like this scene or they don't like the script overall, but they can't give you any specifics of why they don't like the script overall. It really becomes sort of like an investigative job to try to figure out what is the note behind the note? What is the thing that you can actually focus on and figure out, okay, they're saying this because of this. Well, this I like, or I'm trying to get across. I can fold that back into my rewrite process by changing how I go about it in this way, right? So, yeah, you will always, everyone has a unique opinion. So you will always have people who love your scripts and always have people who hate your scripts or don't like your scripts or think this meh. It's the nature of the beast until you develop the skill to the point where you can craft a story that takes people on enough of a ride that even if they don't like the script, they will like the ride. Does that make sense? Like, they might not like the story or the theme or the whatever, but you've taken them on such an enjoyable ride, they'll say, I'd like to see what else you have, or send me your next project because that was a great read, even if they didn't like it, right? Dimitri says, writing is a lot like stripping naked. First-time writers will fear being exposed because you draw from your experiences, and many times you fear that your family and friends will judge you. So yeah, the reality is everybody will judge you. Okay. I mean, look, I do this. I always get haters. I always get somebody downvoting this. I can't for the life of me figure out how anything I put up on this channel could get downvoted. Even if you don't agree with something, like, make a comment. Why don't you agree with that? Let's talk about it. We'll find some common ground. There will always be people who don't like you for whatever reason, don't like what you're doing, don't like your writing, don't like your stories. If you're only getting feedback from friends and family who don't know screenwriting, who don't understand the format, who don't understand what it's trying to do or achieve, that feedback is always going to be, it's going to be hard. Yes, you have to strip naked in the sense that you've got to put yourself out there. And when you write something, especially something creative, something narrative, you're putting your own creativity out for others to assess or judge or give you their opinions on, even if, frankly, I don't need your opinion, Mom. So it's, at the end of the day, that's just something that, as writers, you have to get okay with. One of the steps in my system is called thicken your skin, because it's about developing a thick enough skin that the negative feedback or the judgments or the hate or the criticism or whatever it is, people making negative comments on my channel, all that stuff just washes over you. Because ultimately, okay, so how do we do that? Ultimately, if you understand that what you're trying to do is tell a story, is tell a cinematic story, tell a story in a way that puts the movie in the mind of the reader. If somebody reads it and they don't like it, well, okay, fair enough. Then you didn't like it. You didn't like the movie. I go see a movie. You've gone to see movies in the theater or on Netflix or whatever, and you go, I didn't like that. Okay. Should the filmmaker go cry about the fact that you didn't like their movie? Well, no, because it's maybe not for everyone. So what you want to do is say, did you get what I wanted you to get out of it? Now, you can't say it in those words, but those are the questions. That's what you want to find out from people. If you start to shift the way you ask for feedback, if you shift your perspective on these things, then the feedback that you get won't be able to cut to the core anymore, because you'll be looking at it more objectively. Did I hit my target? Did you get this out of it? When he did this thing, what were you thinking about when he did this thing? Oh, I imagined he was going to blah, blah, blah. okay, well, that wasn't what I had in mind. So maybe I need to go back and tweak some of that. So there's, when you're new to it, when you're new to screenwriting or even any kind of creative writing where you're putting yourself out there, or really anything where you're putting yourself out there. Public speaking is another one of those things that everybody freaks out about. It's only because it's new and you are judging yourself the way you imagine they're judging you. At the end of the day, the reader wants an extraordinary experience. They want to enjoy your script. They don't want to open your... Here we go, another screenplay. Like they're like hoping that this is going to be the best one. They get to page 1. Nope, this is not going to be the best one. Okay, fair enough. But the goal, they're hoping that they're going to find that diamond in the rough. And that's the... Assume the best and then see where it takes you. Jasmine says, I have written a script and am stuck in the rewrite. I keep thinking there's always room for improvement. There is always room for improvement. I don't know if you were here last week, Jasmine, but we talked about the rewrite process and it having 6 levels to it. Part of the problem, I guess one of the questions, I don't know if you're still here, the number of viewers has gone down since I last looked at the number of viewers. If you're still here, do you have a process for rewriting, or are you just sort of going in and going, well, I need to improve this scene or I need to improve that scene? Because if you're just thinking in terms of there's room for improvement, there probably is always room for improvement, but the question is not, can this be improved anymore? Almost everything can continue to be improved. We improve it when we go shoot it. We improve it when we edit it. We improve it when we polish it at the end. That improvement is a never-ending process. But what we want to make sure of with the script is that you're creating something that does what it sets out to do. When I judge a movie or a script, I'm one of the questions that I'm asking myself, kind of subconsciously at this point, but initially I was very consciously asking, what is this script trying to say? Or what is this script trying to achieve? What effect is this trying to have on the audience? And then, does it do that? Does it do that well? What areas is it not doing that? If I can't figure out what it's trying to achieve or what it's trying to say or do, or the experience is trying to give the audience, the viewer or the reader, if I can't figure that out, well, then it's not clear, and that's what needs to be focused on. If I can figure that out and it's not really doing it effectively, I can start to look at why. And those are the areas that we need to improve upon. So if you're, I'm going to see if she's still here. I don't see any follow-up. She probably left. But if you're stuck in the rewrite, my approach is a 6-level approach, and you basically go through it from the big picture level, the whole story level, the act level, the scene level, the dialogue level, and the experience level. And in that way, we see how the different things are connected to each other. And you're not just rewriting for the sake of rewriting, you're rewriting to ensure that you're actually strengthening the story that you've created. So it's arduous to learn how to do it. It's a very detailed process, but once you understand it, once it starts to become intuitive, once you do it, it becomes second nature, and you can look at any draft and go, right, bang, 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 and you start to get really quick at the rewrite process. AKM says, does the screenwriter need a laptop while he's working on the set, or can a good phone or tablet work well? That's a couple steps down the road, probably for everybody. But I would say that yes, you'll need a laptop probably on the set. A phone rewriting a script, I don't think that's probably going to work very well. But also the production might provide one, so it kind of depends on budget level, and it kind of depends on a whole lot of things. But getting to that point, there are a whole lot of roadblocks we have to overcome before we get to that point. So that's not necessarily the most important thing at the early stage. If you get to the point where you're on set and you get to the point where somebody's making your film, it's going to have gone through so much that you'll probably have a laptop at that point if you don't have one right now. RM says, grateful, thank you. Tobias says, the major inciting incident happens on page 10, something like that, I was told. Page 60 is the turning point. We need not follow a roadmap. Yeah, that's formula. If anyone tells you something has to happen on a certain page, they're telling you a formula. That's not true. Nothing has to happen on any certain page. Nothing has to happen on any specific page. Let it be known. That is simply formulaic writing. And here's the problem that I have with formula, and we'll probably keep coming into this one as we go through this series. But formula is devised from analyzing existing projects. So if you look at 10 films and you say, well, they sort of had the same event writer on these pages, and so you can take 10 films that support your formulaic idea and say that use those 10 films as the example and show that this is the formula that works. But you can also take 10 other films that do not fit that formula, and they might work equally as well. It's about principles. It's about storytelling. It's about finding that authenticity. It's about tapping into the unique experience of humanity and telling stories that resonate with an audience. If my goal is to start an independent film studio that makes literally hundreds of films a year, that's the end target. Imagine if I made even a film a month where every film had exactly the same format and hit the same inciting incident on the same page every single time. The audience is going to become so familiar with that pattern that it is going to remove entirely their ability to have a visceral emotional experience. So just by nature of the fact that I'm using the formula can kill the very thing that people have come to see, that they've come to experience. We can't take that approach, and that's why I don't take that approach. So I look at principles instead. There's always a beginning, there's always an end, there's something that happens in the middle. When it's most stories, maybe 2/3 of stories, maybe more, follow a structure where the beginning sort of sets up the situation, the middle is sort of the main overcoming of the obstacles as those obstacles get bigger and bigger, which shows you sort of an end point, a resolution, a way to resolve the thing that the story started, the thing that set off the story in the first place. Those are dynamics. If you say that certain events have to happen on certain pages, you're taking every idea you have and trying to shoehorn them into one possible way of telling a story. We have unconventional narratives. We have non-linear storylines. We have stories where the first half is all just set up and then the second half goes quickly because that's the effect that we want to have. Don't buy into the notion that things happen on. Sorry, I didn't mean to specifically go after you because you said that. But I as a general principle, I'm a big believer anyway that we do not want to follow formulas where an event has to happen on a certain page. It's not about that. It's about finding the story. It's about what are you trying to say? How best will you say that? If it's not a hero-driven story, if it's not a classic 3-act structure story, maybe a more effective way to do it is a 4-act story where each act is a different season, so it reflects the annual human experience. So that wouldn't necessarily be a 3-act structure. I know there are people that say, you got the second act part 1, second act part 2. Maybe you have a 5-act story or a 7-act story. It really is a question of what is it that you're trying to say? What's the effect you want the audience to take away, and creating a story about that. We'll talk about those kinds of story structures in upcoming episodes. Let's see. Scrolling through the future. Okay. Sweet idiot said, "I'm here." I didn't see that before. Anyway, was that Sweet Idiot? Was that what I had? What I said? What you were asking? Tobias says, Jeff, do you normally know after the first 10 pages or sooner if a script is working or not? You have to give each script the time to do what it's set out to do. But I have found that typically I know by page 1 if it's unlikely to work out. Not always the case, and I've been wrong before, but probably 99% of the time, I'd say. But not because of some page breakdown. It's because of how the writer handles the story and how they're telling the story. If it's a very pedestrian, here we are at the house, the room looks like this, here's so-and-so waking up, and if it's very, for lack of a better word, pedestrian, then it's unlikely that the story will be very profound, right? If the story has an engaging way of pulling me in, if you're pulling me in with a unique scene or situation or visuals, and they're written in a way that they're putting the pictures in my head rather than me having to figure it out, that's the kind of thing that's going to draw me in. We'll get more into writing style. I have a whole idea for an episode on just writing style and like the language of screenwriting. Let's see. Video Vasco says, how much would you say one can cheat in the screenplay? Well, so it depends on what you mean by cheat. Video Vasco, are you still here? Yes, you are. So it depends on what you mean by cheat. Do you mean cheat on formatting, or do you mean cheat on sort of narrative devices, or how? So, for example, if you do this really engaging opening scene and then 3 pages in, the character wakes up, that to me is a cheat, right? So that's a story cheat, though. That's very different to, cheating the spacing of the words on the page. So it kind of depends on what you're asking as to how I would go about addressing that question. But I would say, in general, I'm not going to scroll down yet to look at it, but I just scrolled down just to look. In general, I would say you can absolutely cheat all you want, as long as your cheating is more effective than following the rules. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not a rules guy, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to do things this way, this way, this way. There are no rules specifically. There are conventions. There are, the slug line and the action line, the dialogue. These are the conventions of screenwriting for a very specific reason. It's laid out in a very specific way for a very specific reason. If you don't know what those reasons are, well, then that's going to come through in your writing. We're going to know you don't know what those things are. So when you cheat, it's going to be pretty obvious that you cheat, right? That it's like, oh, this person doesn't know. So if you don't know, it's going to be quite unlikely that your story is going to have the major impact that we kind of want it to have, right? So those are the dead giveaways. Like a completely novice writer, somebody who has an idea for a movie, they look online, they watch a few videos on screenwriting, that looks easy. They download some software, that looks easy. They type out 100 pages, that looked easy, and they send it in. You read those things and you go, oh, okay, they've written something in script format, but they have no idea why the format is what it is, and they're not telling a cinematic story. So clearly they don't know what they're doing. We can recognize that instantly. So if you are cheating in that sense, then it's not going to go well. And you're going to think, oh, it's an inaccessible industry and nobody can ever break in because nobody will read my script. And it's like, well, okay, but you haven't taken the time to understand this stuff either. So anyway, Paul Rowe says, does it make sense as one of the many avenues to get noticed as a screenwriter to have a script made into a short, self-funded, in addition to contests, querying, etc.? So yes. So I have a very specific opinion on shorts. I think shorts are a fantastic thing, and by all means, if you want to learn production and you want to learn, how to go about, if you want to learn what translating an idea from the page to the screen is all about, shorts are a good entry into that. Often you'll have an idea in your head, and just getting it onto the page in words that another person reading it will see the same image you saw, that is a challenging thing in its own right. But then to take that and turn it into the image that you had in your head, or that someone else, even better, has in their head, that's a learning experience that most screenwriters don't actually have. That's the whole reason I'm building my indie film studio, is because most writers don't have that experience. And that experience, that knowledge, will completely inform your screenwriting going forward, because you'll understand not just about how the words land on the page and how they get from there into the reader's head, but how they then get translated into pictures that then people consume. So yes, I do think writing short films, making a self-funded short film, I think that's definitely a good idea. And I would probably recommend everyone who has it or wants it or is interested in this kind of thing, I think you should do it. I was making short films long before any of this. Like, I was making short films. I had video cameras when I was 15, 14. I bought my first camera, I think, when I was 14. It was big, like, shoulder mount things. And I would go around and I would videotape everything and I'd piece it all together later. I had to edit it in camera. There's a little button to, you'd film something and then you'd hit the pause button and then you'd go over here and you'd like film that pause, right? So it'd be like cut to that. So it was hard because you didn't have the nonlinear editing stuff. Nowadays, there are so many ways to learn things that are, yes, by all means, take advantage of them. That said, my specific opinion about short films is that it's very easy to capture someone's attention and hold their attention for 5 minutes. Capturing their attention and holding it through the ups and downs of an emotional roller coaster as a story builds over an hour and a half to 2 hours is a whole other level of skill set. And so one of the reasons I teach feature film screenwriting is because if you can develop the skills to tell a long form story and hold someone's interest and take them on that emotional roller coaster, give them the ups and the downs, help them, make them laugh, make them cry, make them care about a story and keep caring about it through the twists and turns of the story. If you can develop those skills, then all of that is applicable to short films. All of that is applicable to TV series. All of that is applicable to plays and novels and corporate films and whatever else you might do to make money along the way, right? But all of those other things are not intrinsically applicable to feature film screenwriting and long form storytelling, holding that audience's interest and growing that interest as you go further into the story, building deeper and deeper empathy with a character so that when the events of the story unfold and really impact that character's life, well, then at that point, it's like, oh, we care because we've had so much time building up the empathy for that character. So in that sense, I would not suggest generally for if your goal is to write or your goal is to write movies or TV, in general, I wouldn't recommend spending too much time on writing lots of short films or going too far down that road. Also, production is a very different thing to writing, and developing the skills to make a short film, cameras and editing and visual effects and lighting and sound and all that stuff, securing the location and making sure it's quiet enough to record the dialogue, and if it's not, then doing the ADR and all that stuff. All of those things there are people who focus on every single word of that sentence I just said and make a career out of that one word, right? And recording sound or looping the dialogue or doing the visual effects. So getting good at all that stuff is going to take monster time, right? Writing and getting good at telling the stories that are going to pull us through all that and that are going to create characters we care about and all that stuff, that skill set is going to take a whole lot of time as well. And so for my money, I would suggest if you want to be a writer or you want to write movies or TV or what have you, or you want to turn the ideas that you have into movies and TV, it's really important to get really good at the long form storytelling, which is why I generally recommend spending most of your time working on developing the craft of screenwriting. So hopefully that makes sense. But yes, never a bad idea to go out there and make some things and see how things are different. Steve said, this is great. Thanks, Steve. Tobias said so many times, talking about a Mulan conversation. Let's see. Okay, they're talking about the story. They're talking about the World War I story. I'm going to hopefully not edit the beginning and end of this live stream so that the live chat will replay later. Of course, now that I've said that, nobody's going to chat anymore because nobody wants to be read later by other people. See, Klaichi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's important to filter who is hating and who is giving constructive criticism or feedback. If there is there intention to help or to be negative? I definitely agree with that. I think sometimes we can be sensitive and think it's hate when it's initially intended to be constructive criticism or feedback. I have been guilty of that in the comments. I don't know if you're aware, but I read and respond to every single comment on my YouTube channel. So if you ever have nothing to do, go dig through my YouTube comments. There is a ton of value I try to teach in the comments as well. Every so often, I'll do some back and forth with somebody and I'm convinced I'm right and they're just hating on me and I'm like, oh, actually I think they were maybe just making a point and I really took it negative. So we have to be careful about that, but generally I do agree that hate and constructive criticism are two different things. So, and it does come down to intention. Leonardo, I didn't see where you said what you said before. Meant to say subjective, not objective. Did I say objective once when I meant to say subjective? That's possible. See. Let's see. Nothing has to happen on any page. Video Vasco said, quote, nothing has to happen on any page. Think you should make a t-shirt. If you guys want merch, I'm trying to find ways to help support all this. Since not too many people are joining me on the weekend screenwriting workshop, which is pushing that all back, unfortunately. And we need more people to join us in Fast Screenplay. If you want to go all the way, that's great. I'm also happy to introduce merch for writers. So if you find anything you think I should put on a t-shirt, let me know and we'll see if we can put some of that together. Anything that can help support the channel and what I'm trying to do here is certainly helpful, because at the moment, spending a lot of money and a lot of energy on all this stuff and struggling to get the writers going. Anyway, the thing about the 3-act structure is that it's not absolute, says Dimitri. It's fluid and can be molded and shaped to your story. Well, that's true about the general 3-act structure. That's not necessarily true of some of the very specific story formulas. I find it useless for any writer in terms of structure. I find it useless for any writer in terms of structure, but I disagree with on this page, this needs to happen. Yes, I agree. Oh, you find it useful for any writer. Well, so yes, as a learning device, I would definitely say the 3-act structure helps. I do include it in Fast Screenplay. It's all I teach it. So I'm not against the 3-act structure. It should be noted. But it is a specific story form for specific types of stories, and it's not the only way to tell a story. The Europeans have made years and years of films that do not adhere to the 3-act structure, which are quite beautiful films that say a lot of really profound things. So, it really depends on. I'm a bigger believer that if we take you through the process, that in the process of shaping your idea, putting it on the page, strengthening it until it's what you want it to be, polishing that into a page-turner reader experience that really lands and connects with the reader. They can't wait to find out what happens next. I think just the nature of taking you through that process will help you find the structure and develop and refine the structure that's right for your idea more powerfully than saying we have to put this here and this here and this here. One is expansive to imagination, that keeps it unlimited and can take you into new creative directions that we haven't seen before. And the other shoehorns everything into a specific framework, whether that's a general guide or whether that's a very specific formula. Anything that's going to sort of shoehorn an idea isn't necessarily being true to the idea. We need to see what the idea wants to be. I mean, that sounds airy-fairy, but you have an idea, you want to say something, you want to get a feeling across. You may need to not do what that sort of conventional thinking would have you do in order to convey that idea effectively or in a new way. So anyway, it's a little more advanced talk than these are some advanced concepts that I like to go into a little bit later usually. So Samantha says, we appreciate everything you do here. Thanks, Samantha. I appreciate that. MJ said, sorry, late. Well, hello. Is he taking questions? I see you asking later on. Let me see if there's anything else in between. Formatting, character introduction, and so on. Video Vasco. What did you mean by that? Formatting, character introduction, and so on. Anyway, if you want to follow up Video Vasco with a little more specific question there, because I'm not quite sure what that meant, but I'm happy to talk about formatting and character introduction and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. MJ says one movie and one pilot under the belt, working on second movie script. Fantastic. That's good. How long have you been working at this, MJ? Is he taking questions? Yes. I've heard good and bad things about doing flashbacks. I've stayed away from them. But at times I feel a need to use a flashback. Flashback, good or bad? So this is an age-old question. There's always controversy, so I may as well step into the fray and develop a few haters along the way. I believe that flashbacks are a perfectly valid technique to use. The problem is that most people use them poorly. Most people use, here's the basic crux of flashbacks. Most writers use flashbacks to give the audience exposition. In other words, to tell us something you think we need to know about the story. That is what flashbacks are mostly for, but you need to make sure that the audience wants to know that information. So when you're using a flashback, you need to make sure that it's building the current narrative, right? So if you have your main story and then you want to jump back to a flashback, it has to be providing some information that takes what we've just seen to another level or builds on it in some way, not just fills in background information about the thing that we've witnessed or about elsewhere in the story. It needs to add to the drama. And because it's a flashback and because you're injecting it somewhere, it's not natural or intuitive that would actually be enhancing the drama or the narrative at that point, right? So if it feels disconnected from the current story or just feels like you're giving us information, it's a little bit like a character explaining some backstory rather than engaging in whatever the dynamic is that's happening in the scene. So I would say, I don't even want to say anything like use it sparingly, because I used to say use flashbacks sparingly, but I think if you're using flashbacks to effect, flashbacks can be fantastic. And sometimes you can have a whole sort of flashback storyline that is a subplot that runs throughout your whole narrative, right? So your main story is whatever. I can't think off the top of my head, but your main story is the characters trying to get this thing. But when they were a kid, they also tried to get something similar. So maybe we're going to keep cutting to a flashback story, and then maybe you're paralleling how life doesn't change or how the character has changed from the way they used to approach the thing that they're pursuing. It really depends on the story, right? So you can't say it's a bad thing or it's a good thing. It really depends on the specific story situation as to what works and what doesn't, what's going to be effective or not effective in that. So, but usually when people say no flashbacks, they don't usually add the why. My whole thing, and you'll find that with everything that I teach here, is I want you to understand the why, so that it's not just about rules for this or that. It's about you understand how to do something effectively or how to improve what you're doing. Let's see. All right. Badmation. Have you ever thought about doing a fast screenplay clubhouse or green room group? I tried to sign up for Clubhouse, and I have one of these like okay, we're going to let you know when your account's ready. And they've never let me know. So I don't have an account. That way we can verbally discuss different topics. So what I do want to do, so let me run this by everybody. I probably should do this at the beginning when there's more people here. But I do have an idea for having a sort of members area where we would do feedback. So one of the requests I get often is people want me to give feedback on their idea or their story or their pages or what have you. And I just don't have the time to be able to do that outside of something like this, where giving feedback to one person can be to the benefit of many. Right. But I know that also putting something on YouTube for everyone to see, it's a little daunting to get feedback on that publicly. So I'm sort of floating this idea of possibly having like a members area where you would send in your stuff and we would give feedback, and it would be more like a Zoom call where we would have people on camera and we would have the audio and we'd be able to talk it out rather than just me talking at you. By the way, this is going to eventually be more that than what this is right now. Is that something that people would want to do? If so, let me know. Let me see. But anyway, but to the point of like doing a conversation group to discuss different topics. Yes, that's cool. What I have in mind for this show, in case I haven't seen your name before, so if you're new to what I'm doing here, eventually each week is going to be a deep dive into a different aspect of screenwriting and storytelling and creativity and the business and the craft and all that stuff, right? So each week, we're going to do a different deep dive. So one week, we'll go into the tone of your story. One week, we'll go into the pacing of your screenplay. And we'll have examples and we'll do exercises and have deep discussion and all that stuff. So I don't know that this is going to be, or even the members only sort of area would be conducive to a verbal discussion of that. But I do want to open it up more to different voices as well. So I float these ideas out there. Let me know what you guys think. I already have some of that in mind for people who have joined the weekend screenwriting workshop. There will be upcoming sessions. We're going to be doing an upcoming session it's going to probably now be August before we can do the next session of the weekend screenwriting workshop. But we'll see how we go for time and all that stuff. Those are very good because we do have a whole section in the weekend screenwriting workshop where we discuss things and what have you. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Tobias says, should we be writing short scripts as well as features? Jeff, I don't think so unless you want to. They're just different. They're a very different topic. When I ran for 5 years, I ran a short film festival in New Zealand called the Big Mountain Short Film Festival. And we would look at different short films that came in, and we got short films from all around the world. And you can see definitely how short films are helpful to understanding story and storytelling, but you can also see the limitations of them as a device for helping you get better at what you're doing. I'm a big believer of, again, writing features, but it really depends. It depends on what you want to do. As a writer, should we be focused on writing in one particular genre and not in a variety of genres? There's conflicting opinions on this. I'm a big believer that if you're passionate about a genre, go all in on that genre, right? Lots of different projects within that genre. If you're not, or you like to tell all kinds of different stories, having a writing sample in different genres is definitely a good thing to have. So there's no right or wrong. It really depends on you. It depends on what you're wanting to do and what you MJ says don't get stuck in one genre. You limit your option. Well, I agree, but then again, if you're really a master of that genre, I mean, when I was a young actor, I was always afraid of getting pigeonholed. And my acting teacher at one point said, I would love to get pigeonholed because then you get lots of work and eventually you can break out of the pigeonhole. Oh, that's a really good way to look at it. So, anyway, be nonlinear. I'd like that on a t-shirt. There you go. Right, we love and passionate about any genre, rom-com, anything that'll enable you to write a great script. I do agree that you need to write what you're passionate about, because that's where the fuel comes from to push through and actually develop the skills to be able to do it. Is there much difference between formatting a feature script and a pilot script? Generally, it depends on if it's a comedy or a drama. There can be. The old way of writing for commercial breaks, network TV used to have a slightly different format. These days, because usually it's like limited series or the Netflix stuff and even network TV, if you learn and understand the feature format, then you can generally apply that to a pilot script and it will be taken seriously. It's some of the formatting differences were just quirks of the way things were done in that specific area. So there are some differences, but it's not. If you learn the feature formatting rules, then that will apply to pilots and stuff as well. Video Vasco said, meant about the cheating. Cheat a bit in character introduction. Every few pages describe the emotion in the room after dialogue. Trying to write for other senses, stuff like that. So, the one that stuck out for me was the example of every few pages describe the emotion in the room after the dialogue. I will notice that. I will notice that you've done that, and it will point out to me that you're not skilled enough to just do it through the scene. If you have to describe what I'm supposed to be feeling, then your scene and your situation has not made me feel it, right? If I can't intuit from what I've read that there's a gloomy darkness hanging over the scene, such that you need to write, there is a gloomy darkness hanging over the scene, I'm going to instantly recognize from the fact that you wrote it, either I will already know that and you're kind of calling me stupid for not recognizing it, or I will not realize that that was the emotion of the scene. Reading that, I will see that that was the emotion of the scene, and I'll think, oh, okay, well, why are you telling me this and not showing me this? Clearly, there's a disconnect here. You can cheat all you want to, but just know that the people who are reading the scripts are not stupid. They're going to be able to pick up on what you did, how you're cheating. They will definitely recognize it, and it's going to have an effect on how they respond to, interpret, react to what you've written. Hopefully that makes sense. Memento. I'm not sure what that was referring to. I can invite you in. Are you talking about Clubhouse? I can invite you into Clubhouse if you like. Yeah, sure. I don't know Clubhouse, so I don't know what the benefit of it is, or for me, I'm always afraid of more things that are going to take time away from what I need to be doing. My whole point for setting up a live stream is simply it takes too long to put together videos. So if I can keep putting value out there into the world by just doing it one day a week, then I can spend the rest of the days of the week building the film studio and doing all the other stuff. So adding new things, sure. Let's talk about it. Send me an email send an email through fastscreenplay.com and we can talk more about that. I'd like to write a script that has flash forwards. Just have to figure that out. Lost beat you to that one. But go watch the final season of Lost, or when did they introduce the flash forwards? Anyway, you can watch that. They figured it out. Although they did not have a very solid ending. So did they figure it out? We have more people asking about trying to get Clubhouse invites. Discord is a great way to do that. Have people call in. Yeah, I think I can have people call in through here too, if we do it one at a time, through my setup that is currently not happening because of. Watch the very beginning of this when this goes up as a replay, and You'll see what happened if you are just joining us now. I'll get feedback publicly any day. Oh, cool. Sounds great. What is the weekend show? I'm not keeping up. Sorry. The weekend screenwriting workshop is what I was talking about. The weekend screenwriting workshop is when I first started teaching screenwriting, I started teaching the idea that I was looking for screenplays to produce as a follow-up to that project that we didn't finish. I thought we were going to finish it soon, and I started looking for projects that we could take to Cannes with our film and say, if you don't like this, how about these? You want to give us money for this? And so I asked everybody if they had screenplays. Nobody had screenplays in Australia in the late 90s. And so everybody had ideas for movies, but they didn't have screenplays. So I thought, why don't I put together an 8-week workshop that goes from idea to first draft? And I put together this workshop. We had like 15 people in this workshop, a couple of which have gone on to big careers. But anyway, so we started doing this workshop, and about 3 weeks into it, I went, oh my God, people don't really know the basics, at least in the late 90s, at least in Australia. People didn't know the basics of screenwriting. The internet wasn't quite what it is today. So I think more people have some of the basics, even though there's a lot of misinformation and wrong-headed ideas out there. But anyway, so I thought, well, why don't I take everything you need to know before you sit down to go idea to first draft, and everything you need to know from the producer's perspective, and put it all into one weekend, like this jam-packed 12-hour weekend workshop where we would bounce ideas off and I'd give you exercises and we discuss it and all that stuff. And people loved that workshop. I ran that workshop to over 1,200 people. I ran it over 80 times in 10 cities in 6 countries over a span of about 5 years. People loved the workshop, but nobody then followed through and went out and made their project. So I went, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore. And I went off and started a film festival. Anyway, cut to a few years later, and I still didn't find any screenplays. So I started building Fast Screenplay so that I wouldn't have to travel around and teach people. I could just build an online thing. If you do it, great. If you don't do it, that's on you. And then last November, I had this sort of epiphany where it was like, I need to give you more upfront. And so I thought I would rebuild the weekend screenwriting workshop from yesteryear, update it for, like, the opportunity has infinitely expanded today, way beyond the opportunity we had then. And the opportunity was huge back then. So today we have just like mind-boggling opportunity based on when I first got into this industry back in the 80s. Like, the opportunities today are exponentially more vast than they were back then. So I thought, well, why don't I recreate why don't I rebuild the workshop as an online thing? You can binge watch the whole thing in 12 hours or 6 hours if you do it at double speed, or you can take your time and watch little pieces over time. And so we rebuilt the weekend screenwriting workshop. Weekendscreenwriting.com is where to go to get it. We're going to be doing a couple more live sessions throughout the rest of the year to sort of further refine the workshop, make it like everything I want it to be. The first session we did, it's awesome. We're going to go even further with it. So if you go over there now, you get the first session and it's all on demand. You get it right away, but then you also get access to the upcoming live sessions as well. And then eventually it'll just be that one final live session. So that's what the Weekend Screenwriting Workshop is all about. Weekendscreenwriting.com. And also it supports the show. So if you join there, you can get up to speed. The questions that we ask on this show can go even deeper. And every dollar that comes into that gets poured back into this and expanding all this and taking this to the next step. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Tobias. Oh, MJ says, I've thought thrillers would be difficult to write. I've written a sci-fi movie, comedy pilot, doing another sci-fi now, and then a drama. Took years to finish the movie, 3 months for pilot. Okay. Let's see. Mr. Wild, quite a mix. 4 seasons, oh darn, past the flash. The comedy pilot came out of nowhere. Oh, we're talking about MJ's projects. Is Blacklist a good place to post a script? I'm not going to give specific opinions on that kind of thing. I talked about it a little bit in one of the earlier episodes. I don't really want to. I don't have any personal experience with the Blacklist, and so I don't know them. And they're probably fantastic people, and I got no issue with that. I really think the way that you break in is a little bit different than trying to get yourself on a list where people are going to go hunt and find you. Getting feedback is a very subjective thing. So getting feedback from one reader or one coverage service is, that's one person's opinion. And like I said earlier, the only way feedback is really beneficial to you is if it's an aggregate, if you get a general consensus of what the feedback is. So it's a little, these kinds of services are, I would probably say try it and see what comes, but I don't have any experience with it. So your mileage may vary, and I don't have really an opinion one way or the other of it. My belief is that strategically the way to go about building a career, strategically the way to get your first script made is to find and connect with people sort of coming up like you are. And then you build the relationships together. If you think about, Francis Ford Coppola and Spielberg and George Lucas, they were all sort of making films around the same time, and they sort of came up together, right? So they could support each other in that way. Now, a writer will have this idea for, whoever's the top filmmaker at the time that you're watching this, whoever's your favorite filmmaker, right? You want to write a film for them, but they've worked with lots of people. They have lots of relationships. They have people they love and they would love to work with again if the opportunity presented itself. To break through that sort of little bubble is an extraordinary challenge, not because they're trying to keep you out or hold you back, but because we like to, it's a relationships business. We like to work with people we like. We like to work with people whose artistic sensibilities we're in sync with. And so if you're starting out or you're still developing your skill, I think finding the filmmakers who are developing their skill as well is probably a better strategic approach. So my focus would be not so much on trying to break through that seemingly closed door to the top tier of the Hollywood studio system, but instead to try to build your skills as you build other filmmakers' careers along the way. And I think it's a much better strategy to get into, and it's one that I would have liked very much had it been available to me as a filmmaker 20-something years ago when I started going down this road. And so it's the thing that I'm trying to build. So that's my suggestion. So those kinds of services, I don't have any problem with them. I don't know them that much, but that's not where I'm necessarily going to suggest going as a first. You can certainly go and try them and do them. Who knows? Maybe it'll work for you. But I don't think I think it's more of a buying a lottery ticket rather than a strategic way to get where you're trying to go. And I'm all about, let's get there strategically. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense and doesn't piss anybody off. Let's see. Should like to do the weekend workshop. Writing screenplays in the late 90s was a lost cause. It's funny. The late 90s was a spec boom. So writing in the 90s wasn't exactly a lost cause. It was just things change, right? Like, here's the thing you got to understand about the film industry. So many of the screenwriting guru books were all written in a different era. They were written in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s when things were different. We didn't even have YouTube at that time. So the whole picture of the thing was different. It was all about the studio system and the gatekeepers and breaking through the gatekeepers with an extraordinary spec. And if you had an extraordinary spec, you'd get into this bidding war with the different studios. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's great. And writing stories for that time, yeah, sure, hitting all those formulaic, this page, that page, building a story in this way, hero's journey and all that stuff. Like, yeah, that made sense for that model. We live in a completely different era today. Any one of you watching this right now could go out, buy a camera, go out and shoot a film, a 4K camera. You can make something that Netflix would buy. They need a minimum of 4K today. So you go out, you shoot a 4K film, shoot it low budget. If it's got a great story, if you've got some great visuals, maybe you can hire a name actor or a sort of B-level name actor, someone vaguely familiar to audiences, well, then maybe it's got something you could market it to. If you make it on a low enough budget level, you can make enough money to make your money back, to keep going with the next project. This is a completely different thing. The gatekeepers don't exist in the same way anymore. So the kinds of stories we can tell, the kinds of stories audiences want to watch are different to what they wanted to watch in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So we need to adapt to the times. And if you're a writer that's trying to break in the way that you broke in 30 years ago, well, you're following advice that was, maybe still has some value. There may be some principles involved that are still certainly applicable, but strategically not necessarily the greatest way of going about doing it, right? So why don't we instead focus on this just like unending smorgasbord of opportunity available to us today, not for huge riches, but certainly for developing our skill, certainly for building a filmography and the credits that are going to then open the bigger doors. Certainly for developing those relationships that when you make the first low-budget film, you write the first low-budget film of this up-and-coming director who's currently a nobody, man, you've written their first film and it's gotten all the accolades and whatever. Well, then guess what? If you have another project, you certainly have someone you can reach out to. They go, wow, I love your next project. Let's make that on the bigger budget. And you go up with them. This is the strategy for today. And in my opinion, writing for that environment is a much better strategic approach. So I don't even know how I got down that road. But anyway, so that's sort of one of my things. Let's see. Many screenplays get produced from the blacklist. Okay. Many producers and people in the industry. Sure. Google how many films have been produced. Yes. Keep in mind also, though, that the Sundance Film Festival gets pre-pandemic and eventually post-pandemic as well, but maybe not the pandemic year, has gotten consistently about 4,000 feature film submissions every single year. That's a lot of films made every single year. So how many of those compared to... Anyway, I just think there's bigger opportunity than some of the traditional ways of doing it. More talk about the blacklist going on in the chat. I was thinking about writing with someone online just for a fun exercise. Where can I find someone? Maybe reach out to other folks in here, MJ. Who knows? There might be people here that want to write with you. You can also find writing groups. You can. There are, Reddit has a screenwriting subreddit, or is it a subreddit? If it's just. Anyway, I don't know Reddit very well, but they have a screenwriting one. Facebook's got a screenwriting one. You can certainly reach out to people and say you're looking for a writing partner. And the writing partners are like finding a spouse, though, so be careful. You got to find someone that's really suited to you, and don't be afraid to say no to people along the way. Let's see. I'm in a small town in the UK, and I only had the New Producers Alliance guidebook to go by and the Artist and Literary Agents Yearbook. It was difficult. Yeah. I'm not sure what those sources are, so I'm not sure how to respond to that. Technology, internet has definitely helped writers get their work out, says MJ. Good time to be a writer, but you still need the talent. And that's the key, really, is at the end of the day, in some ways you need more talent today than you needed back then. Because back then you could get away with writing things in a certain style. There's a very sort of bold writing style that screenplays had in the 80s and 90s that, if you sort of nailed down that style, you could get your work noticed. And this is back when I started learning. And so that's the style that I used to write in. And it's very, Today we have much more potential for nuance, and we have much more potential for think of it in terms of we have much more potential for creating niche audiences and stories. So we don't necessarily have to make the big blockbuster entertainment, the big studio films. That's one possibility, and if that's what you want to do, certainly write that. But we have the opportunity to make lots of different nuanced kinds of stories, especially at lower budgets. So we can certainly develop those skills. As you get better at developing those skills, you naturally get better. You position yourself more for writing at that, breaking through that higher level. Anybody can do it. You could write a spec script tomorrow that is just the right script at the right time, written well, hits all the points, and everybody just loves it, and you break through. But I don't necessarily think that's the best strategy for developing these skills. My thing is this, understand this. I have probably interacted with somewhere on the order of 10 to 12,000 writers now over the past 20 something years, teaching screenwriting and interacting with people who've submitted stuff to us for production and for consideration. I've interacted with a lot of different writers over the years, and everyone is unique. Everyone has a different sort of point of view, and I lost where I was going with this thought. What was I saying right before that? I had something else just catch my eye over here. I've interacted with a lot of writers over the years, and everyone's unique and everyone's different. Most writers think that they're further along than they are, and most writers think they can break through, and so they treat it very much as a almost like a throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. And I think the challenge overall is that at the end of the day, I believe we all can get there, but you have to develop the skill. You have to be really good at it. You have to learn how to do it and be able to do it not just on a page in your own private space, but develop those skills to such a degree that you can get hired to go on set and rewrite spontaneously as needed on set. I mean, that's ultimately that's the skill set you need to have. So how are you developing that skill set? Most writers, in my experience, just write another script and write another script. Maybe read another book and write another script. Read another book or watch some videos on screenwriting and then go try to write another script, rather than actually developing a sort of consistent process that makes it more and more intuitive with every new project. So I lost my train of thought in the middle of that. So hopefully I brought it back to some relevant point. Let me know. You still need, MJ said, you still need the talent. And I would say it's not so much the talent that you need. I would say it's the skill you need, because talent implies something innate, whereas skill implies something that's developed. And in my experience, anyone who actually does the work and puts in the effort can develop the skill. And I think once you develop the skill to a sufficient point, everyone starts calling it talent. So focus on developing the skill, and the talent comes. There was certainly nothing like you in your live stream to hook into. Oh, are you talking about about what's available to you? Yeah. So anyway, my hope is, Tobias, to your point, my hope is to provide a new, my hope is to provide a perspective on what's possible today, and maybe a roadmap and a path to making that happen. That's my goal with all this. And we're going to do as much as we can through the live stream. To dig further, we go into Weekend Screenwriting Workshop, just puts it all in the big picture, and then Fast Screenplay guides you through the whole process. I will be reintroducing at some point, once I've changed a few things around about Fast Screenplay's pricing structure, is we're going to reintroduce the double guarantee. We had a guarantee previously where if you complete the system as instructed and you don't get the results you want, we'll give you your money back at that point. So, because I want you to understand that this thing will get you where you want to go. That's not the guarantee that's up at the moment, but we will be reintroducing that at some point, probably when the price goes up, which it will soon. After Jeff replied to a comment of mine years ago, I'm iffy about relying on contests, including the blacklist. Put that money toward your project, find a crew, and make the movie. So I don't know which comment that would have been, but that sounds like me. Yeah, I don't to be clear, I don't disagree with script competitions or even something like Blacklist or those kinds of services, whatever. I have no problem with any of that stuff. My point is use that stuff strategically. Like, make sure that's a part of your strategic approach. Don't just send your script to a script competition and hope you win, because if you win, it gets read by these 10 people, right? Like, that's a lottery ticket. You're hoping, right? It's a prayer. But if you use competitions as a part of your strategic plan. So, for example, you send it out to a bunch of script competitions. If you win one, you then incorporate the fact that you won into your initial outreach to producers or production companies or agents or whomever. So it becomes about, you want to win the competition so that you have a way to get the door open, rather than in your own strategy, rather than because the competition is going to open the door. So if you don't quite know how to build that strategy, then you're going to be using it in a somewhat different way. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Want to expand on these opportunities. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Vasco. What is the festival you created? Sorry, I may have missed that. Oh, I created a film festival called the Big Mountain Short Film Festival. We ran it for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010, in New Zealand. And it was great. We had a blast. It was originally a 3-day festival, and then after 3 years, I think we brought 2 years. Two years as a 3-day festival. Then it went down to a 1-day festival, and then back up to, I can't remember if it was a 2-day or 3-day festival at the end. But I stepped away from it in the middle. Anyways, the whole thing. But running that, I pitched to another town in New Zealand to do a big, like, 2-week-long festival with features and shorts, and it was all going to be sort of a theme-related festival, sort of in sync with the kinds of stuff that I want to do. I really wanted this small town to jump on board with it. They had this amazing theater, and they seemed really interested in it, but the guy at the top just didn't care enough, I guess. So we didn't get a chance to go with that. But I had plans to turn that into this whole virtual thing before the virtual thing was a thing. This whole virtual thing that would have been like, you could join us from all around the world, and it was I just had the coolest ideas for this film festival. If there's anyone out there who wants to start the coolest film festival in the world, I will pull out that thing. Get in touch with me. We'll figure out a way to make it work. Because I do believe that I wanted to do it because I wanted to incorporate distribution into the strategy of building these skills. So I'm a big believer that you need to see your work on screen to understand some of the screenwriting stuff. To put this in context, when I was making this little low-budget film that we abandoned after 7 years, shooting the film and putting it up on the screen and then screening it for people in a rough cut form when it was incomplete, and then getting all the negative feedback from that. I learned more from that than I ever learned from any screenwriting guru's book ever. And I read all of that stuff in the 80s and 90s. Like, I was voracious in reading everything there was about screenwriting in the 80s and 90s, and when I was actively trying to write stuff that I could go sell and the kind of stuff that you guys are trying to do. So to me, because I learned so much through actually taking an idea from my head all the way through the writing process, and then take that all the way through the shooting process, pre-production, figuring out how we're going to shoot it, casting, location scouting, scheduling. My business partner had a job at the time. We had to work around his schedule, just all that stuff. And then shooting it together, cutting it together, long hours of editing, and then doing ADR for it, and talking to, at the time, negative cutters, and like figuring out if we're going to put it out to on a print, or like, it was just learning all that stuff, every little piece of that process. Colors and impacts and changes how you think about writing. Forevermore, from that point forward, you think about writing something, you're thinking about every piece of that process, and you come up with better ideas for stories or for scenes or for how you would transition from one scene to another. You think about those things. So as a writer, it just radically opens up your thinking. And so for me, my vision was to build an indie film studio initially to make 3 to 6 films a year. If you haven't seen my backstory, remind me. I've said it many times here, but my thought was, there's no way I would be able to write and produce 3 to 6 films a year like that. You can't do all of that work. So you need to focus on one aspect of it. So what I wanted to do was focus on the producing aspect of it, and then maybe every other year, like, direct one of the films myself. And so I needed to find other people who wanted to do the writing part of it. And that's why I started teaching writing and trying to go down this rabbit hole to get writers to write, because I wanted to get lots of projects that I could then produce a whole bunch of projects. Because as a producer, you can produce multiple projects because you get a line producer for this project, and for this project, you get different line producers and different crews and different sets of people doing it, and you're sort of overseeing all of them. That I could do that for 3 to 6 films a year, right? But I would not be able to write them and make them, and then maybe try to direct one every other year. Like, there's no way. It would be just too much. So I got fixated on building the mechanism for doing that kind of output. And the weakest link was the writing. Could not find projects, could not find viable material. Some great ideas along the way, some stories that I really liked along the way, but that were not viable. I had been through the production process. I'd seen that whole thing, and from the inside, we're gonna run into budget problems here. We're gonna run into scheduling problems here. We're not gonna be able to find an actor to do this over here, or the whole thing is it's a little bit out of reach for the budget level we're looking at. Just all sorts of stuff like that. And so that's why I've sort of gone down this road to sort of figure this stuff out. And this is why I want writers to. I really want you guys to learn this stuff so that we can actually go out and do all that, because the opportunity's there. Anyway, sorry, I went off on another tangent. It's actually, Vidya Vasco says, it's much harder to get people to actually see your movie today as well. That's the new hustle, I guess. Well, yes, but that's why that is so integrated with the understanding the marketing side of it, understanding the production side of it, understanding all those things is so interwoven with it. What I'm trying to build, which I don't talk about too much, but what I'm trying to build is the distribution mechanism, so that we have a place where people can go to watch this parade of ongoing films, and it becomes the resource itself. So it becomes the way to sort of harness all the opportunity, but then to to really spotlight new writers, and not only train writers to be able to do this stuff, give them the experience of actually learning the hands-on production, not that you're going to do the hands-on production, but learning how your idea gets turned into the film, those things that I learned along the way. For you to be able to have that, and for that to then be able to inform your future work, that's the thing that I'm passionate about and trying to build for writers, and the whole mechanism of it. And the biggest challenge is that writers just don't follow through. They don't do it. So what do? Here's me trying to convince you guys to do it. Anyway. Dimitri, yes, though it is. Dimitri says, is it tough though? With YouTube and social media and all? It is, because there's just so much content competing for eyeballs. That's the real challenge. But if you create stories that are something special, something above and beyond, that becomes the that becomes the way. We need hooks. We need ways to break through the noise as well. But we can get there. Let's see. Not to make it available, to see it, not make it available. Plus making money from it. Is there a script site better than IMSDB? I don't know. We're going to start looking into trying to find some script examples that we can go through on this show. So I haven't looked for scripts online for a very long time because I'm generally not a big fan of examples, believe it or not, because I really believe that examples, what I have found with teaching writers over the years is that if you give writers an example, they tend to emulate that example rather than understand the dynamics and the principle and the takeaway and use that to come up with something new that's informed by the example. That's just something that I found through my teaching. So I've been really reluctant to do examples. My new thinking on that is, since this year, my new thinking on that is that you want examples, and a lot of people learn by looking at examples. So let's start doing examples. So I'm going to start looking into where to find the scripts, and I'll maybe even start creating a resource that people can have to find scripts and where to go look for scripts. Obviously, forming a reader group would work. I just write scripts and hope for the best. Writing scripts and hoping for the best is not a strategy. It is a way to be passionate about the thing, but actually getting where you're trying to go requires a bit more strategy, in my opinion. But that's okay. We'll develop strategy. Marketing and word of mouth could be difficult. Revenue could be achieved by views on YouTube or whatever service that offers monetization. Yeah, those things are challenging though. The model that's working best at the moment is called AVOD, advertiser video on demand. So you're watching a movie or whatever, and you see ads placed throughout because people don't really want to pay for it, because Netflix and the streaming services have made it such that we don't think in terms of having to pay for movies anymore. We're very resistant to paying for movies now, because like the one-off, here's $5, let me watch the movie, because we've just been trained out of that. So how do you get paid out of that as a filmmaker? There's a whole discussion of that in indie film circles anyway. Let's see. I'm following you wherever you go. Thank you. Pause Films says Z or Z. Oh, and then he said, I didn't mean to put that in the chat. LOL. That's okay. I don't mind a stray letter or two. If you want to ask something though, certainly let me know. MJ says, Jeff, I'll write something with you, and you start, send it to me, and I'll add and change and send back and forth just to see what happens. No ego, just fun. Put it on the channel for the views. So I really appreciate that, and I mean this in the kindest possible way. But I have had that offer probably somewhere on the order of 700-800 times over the years. And the problem is that what I need is I need to write something for development. And in order to write something for development, I need writers to have the entire skill set. And the only way I'm going to know they have that skill set is either if I can see it in their work, like I can see the writing samples that show me they're where I need them to be. Because I can probably recognize from your sample if you have the skill set to be able to do the development for production. In my experience looking at scripts, and you may be the exception, I don't know you or your work, and so don't take this in any way personally, but in my experience, 99% of writers don't have that skill set. And so that is the key. And that is what I'm trying to teach people how to do. So for me, I've had people even from this group or previous shows or people reaching out to me through doing the 10-day free start and all that kind of stuff. I have people reach out to me all the time saying, can I bounce ideas off you and work with you that way? And the reality is, I don't need one film. For me, it's not about making the one movie. It's not about finding the one screenplay anymore. That was what got me going down this road in the first place. But as I was going down this road, and the more I realized that the fundamental problem of screenplay development, the core issues that the industry at large just has not been able to solve, the reality is we need to overcome those if I'm to build the film studio. And so my goals, my passion now is not to find that one project. That's why I've had people say, what kind of story do you want to write? I'll write something and see if you like it. And maybe it's not about writing something that I will make. For me right now, it's about, I want to build this thing. And if I can successfully build this thing, then we take hundreds, thousands of writers on this journey as well. And it becomes something that helps all of us get where we're trying to go. If you haven't watched my TED Talk, I'm a big believer that we all have a different perspective on the world. We have unique DNA. We live life on a different set of space-time coordinates. And so we walk through the journey of life in completely different ways, which gives each of us a unique imagination, which gives each of us stories that only we can tell. So I believe every single one of us has stories that we not only can tell, but we should tell. It's kind of like why we're here in the world, to witness our unique perspective on the world, figure out how to shape that in a way that we can give that to somebody else so that they can experience our insight and it can broaden their experience and perspective as well. And so I want to create the machine, the mechanism by which anyone can come through and capture their stories and turn their stories into screenplays. That includes everyone here. So I want all of you watching this right now. I want to help all of you turn your ideas into stories that actually get turned into films because you have something you want to say. If all you want to do is like, how do I make money as a screenwriter? I'm probably not your guy. If all you want to do is what's the shortest path to becoming the next Oscar winner? That's not what I'm about. I'm about, you have stories you're passionate about. You have stories that you want to share with the world. You have something you want to say. Well, how do we capture that and harness that and turn that into something that independent producers, somebody like me, could actually say yes to and go out and make? If we can nail down that process, if we can figure out that machine, if we can figure out how to start you here and get you to here, and we can actually go do it, well, then this becomes replicable. It becomes something we can repeat and do over and over again. And if that's the case, then we have the means to develop an endless stream of content for the production studio, right? So it's not about doing a back and forth. I don't really have the time to do a back and forth with every writer who would want to, and I definitely want to produce everyone's movies that's watching right now, but through the machine that I'm building that's going to help as many people as possible. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that doesn't sound a little crazy or like whatever. It probably sounds crazy. It's okay. I understand. But anyway, I hope that makes sense, and I'm not in any way dismissive, and I totally appreciate that a lot of you guys who are watching this, if you're watching this, if you're still watching this, then I can see wanting to connect, and I totally do. But we need to connect in a way that builds the machine, at least from my perspective. That's what I'm about. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So let's see. Keep in mind it's a crapshoot. You may not find a movie script in mind. Okay. I've heard several times that indie comedies are the most difficult to get picked up for distribution. Your thoughts? I don't know. I don't know for sure. Indie comedies are. No, I don't want to just sort of crap on about something I don't know for sure. It's not necessarily the genre that I would first go to because it feels like something that would be tricky to sell unless you found a market for it and then you sort of made the film for the market, which is actually strategically the way I generally recommend going about all this. Again, not to write for a market, but because you're passionate about writing that kind of a story and you go around, you find a market that is in sync with you, and so you can write something to your passion that has a place to go. So I'm not sure, but I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Sorry about that, sweet idiot. I hate calling you sweet idiot because I'm sure you're a very nice person. I'm sure the sweet part is good and the idiot part is I'm a little uncomfortable calling you that. Anyway, so what is the most difficult role in filmmaking, Jeff? Is it screenwriting, acting, directing, producing? Depends on how you define difficult. Screenwriting, I would say, is the most wrenching for me, at least. Screenwriting for me is always like, finding just the right way to say the thing that you're trying to say. That's why I've spent so many years trying to reverse engineer it, is because I mean, we all know what it's like to sit there and look at the blank page and just go, that sucks. I hate that. Go back and do it again. That's wrenching. Acting is really difficult to do well. I got pretty good at it for a while there. That was not the time period during which I was actually getting work, but I did get quite good at it, and I taught it for a long time. So I got really good at teaching acting, and so I can spot good acting versus bad acting. Directing, I don't know. I've done directing. Directing is something it's probably one of my biggest passions, but I haven't done enough of it to know the difficulty level, because whenever I did it, it was always fun. So producing is difficult in the sense of you're juggling so many different things all at the same time. So I think if screenwriters had a better understanding and appreciation of the producer's overall job and the challenges and conflicts the producer faces, they would be much more. They'd be much kinder to they wouldn't think of producers as the adversary. They would be much more empathetic toward producers. How often does a script go through to filming unchanged, or all scripts generally rewritten? Yeah, almost everything has to get rewritten to a degree. So it really depends. I mean, there are scripts that went through virtually unchanged. And then there are other scripts that, you have to rewrite 100 times to get it right. And, you got a lot of different voices needing this change or that change. And some of the changes are at odds with each other. So finding the thing that satisfies the dueling set of notes. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of changes generally. Sweet Idiot says, I'm currently making a comedy feature in my graduate program, so selling a comedy is becoming increasingly relevant to my situation. I'll give it some thought and bring it up again. I can't say when, but bring it up again from time to time, and I'll let my brain percolate on it and maybe do a little bit of research into it and see what I can find about it. Tobias says, because writers are so passionate, have you encountered writers who have become upset by producers or directors asking for rewrites? Yes, pretty much every single writer. Every single writer gets upset by the request for rewrites. Because anyway, I don't know if it's every single writer, but generally speaking, I think the only writers who don't get upset by it are either the ones who fully understand that screenwriting is a Screenwriting is the first step into a collaborative craft. That collaborative craft is filmmaking. So if you fully appreciate that, then the idea of rewrites are not going to bother you in any way. If you think that because you wrote the script, this is what the film has to look like, then you're going to be more resistant to notes and feedback, and certainly requests for rewrite. So from what I hear, unless you're indie video Vasco says, from what I hear, unless you're an indie micro writer director, it appears that it's 100% of the time. Yeah, pretty much. Let's get fast screenplay machine working on full steam. There you go. New hashtag. I don't know if that one's going to trend, but that'd be cool. DJ. Hey, hello, DJ. Haven't seen your name here. Do you feel that breaking into film's screenwriting industry is increasingly becoming a case of it's not what you know, but who you know? Seen a lot of trashy movies recently and got me thinking. So, no, I think it's quite the opposite. Breaking into the industry today is not who you know, it's what you know. It's how well you can do the thing. So it used to be that's a cliche from the 80s and 90s, or at least then, probably well before that, because that phrase was there from when I first started in this industry, when I was a small child. It's not what you know, it's who you know is the most ridiculous bit of nonsense I've ever heard in my life. So the example I always give is, imagine you're Spielberg's nephew and you know Spielberg. You can talk to Spielberg at any time. You know him. So clearly, he's going to give you the opportunity to direct your next film, right? Or you've scribbled something onto a page. He's going to go produce it, right? You know him. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? Of course not. How good is that story? Is that story of a caliber that Steven Spielberg can go out and produce back in his heyday? And Steven, if you're watching this, even today, at the end of the day, it's a combination of those things. It's not what you know, it's who you know, is sort of referencing the generally true idea that this is a relationships business. And so if you omit that part of it and you don't concern yourself with building your network or expanding the people and building all that, if you don't concern yourself with any of that stuff, well, how are you going to break in? A lot of writers are resistant to this idea that I have. One part of the reason I get some hate on this channel is because people who've been doing this for a very long time reject the idea that you should write for the indie film market and get known that way. You need to aspire to this. And make no mistake about it. You should aspire to as high heights as you want to go. But how do you get to those heights? I think trying to knock on the biggest, strongest, most elaborate doors that literally thousands of other people are trying to knock on as well is not the best strategic approach. I think the strategic approach is to develop with people who are coming up, right? So it's who you know in that realm, right? So if you're writing you're an emerging screenwriter and you connect with emerging filmmakers, well, guess what? You can start getting those film credits. You can start seeing your name on screen. That is going to be the most important thing you can have to opening the doors to those big, higher heights that you want to get to. So it is who you know, but it's really more what you know and how good you are, how effective your writing is at achieving whatever it is that you've set out to achieve with your story. I hope that makes sense. Oh yeah, there's some terrible films made today, but I still watch them, says Device. At the end of the day, what I used to say, it was very trite, in my original weekend screenwriting workshop back in the early 2000s was, if you ever look at a movie and you go, how does this garbage get made? My answer at the time was, it's because people like you give up. I thought that was very profound and special when I was in my late 20s when I started teaching this stuff. Today, yeah, at the end of the day, you can have a great script that gets turned into a very poor quality film. So let's say I have a great script and I go out and I get a first-time director who's really not able to see this thing to fruition and doesn't have the skill to bring this thing to life. Well, guess what? We're going to end up with a film that might kind of suck or not be at least what the script had the potential to be. That's no reflection on the writer, but yet because it's a collaborative process, it's a collaborative art form, the writer is going to get, geez, this writer sucks because they wrote this, but that wasn't what I wrote. I wrote this other beautiful passage, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, the Oscars for best screenwriting. It's like, are you reading the scripts to determine this, or are you going based on the final film? I've always believed that the Oscars you should have to read the scripts to vote on which one is best screenplay, because sometimes there are great films that the screenplay is just not terribly good, and vice versa. So it's the nature of filmmaking, though. You can write something great and it gets turned into a bad film, and you can write something terrible that just happens to be aligned with a producer who wants to make something on that topic, or that shoots in that location, or that works with that actor, and so they want to make that for other incentives, financial incentives. They want to make a quick buck, or this is going to help open a door to this other thing. There are a myriad of reasons why we might want to make something that is not maybe the top quality thing in the world. And a lot of times people just start out thinking this is great. And when you make it, you look at it, and in the end, it's not, it didn't turn out so good. So, my general advice is not to judge that stuff too harshly. Instead, I would say, if you watch something that you think is terrible, use it as a writing exercise. Focus on why didn't this work? What was this trying to achieve? And in what way did it miss the mark? Because if you can focus on that, you can turn even a bad story, bad screenplay, bad movie into a learning experience, which can help you with your own writing. That's my opinion anyway. Sweet Idiot says, going off your Spielberg analogy, you know who wrote Shark Boy and Lava Girl? Robert Rodriguez's children. Yeah, why not? It makes sense to me. If you're going to write a kid's film, why not get kids to write it? And guess what? Super successful. I write as low as I can go. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, I'm fairly new to your channel, says DJ. Okay, cool. We'll look around, have a look around, come back to us on the next live stream, and we'll do it even more. Video Vasco says, another t-shirt. I wish I knew which one you're talking about. Got to pull out the actual quote too, because I can't remember half of these things. Because people like you give up. He did. You beat me to it. Let's see. So you have to be careful who you allow to option your script? ? Yeah, but this is why you can't be too precious at the beginning. I mean, your initial goal from a career perspective, from a strategic perspective, your initial goal is to get produced. Because once you're produced, you have a way to open those doors. If you're just a writer like anybody else who's got spec scripts under your arm, they're PDFs now, so they're going to be under your arm. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. If you have scripts under your arm and you're trying to get your scripts noticed, who are you? You're just like all these other people trying to knock on my door. If you're like, hey, so my film's in Sundance, or hey, we just got a deal with Apple, whatever, to publish my film on iTunes or whatever, and I've got this other script that I think would be right for you. Have a look at my movie and see if the movie's good. Then of course it's going to be easier to open those doors. So how do you know that the person you're contacting for the initial one is going to be able to make a good enough project? Well, there are ways to go about doing that, which we'll cover as we go on in the series. But generally you don't know. So you don't just want to have garbage made, but if you write a great script and you have talent and your stories are good, talent equaling skill, of course. If you have those abilities and you go out and get an initial film made, and the filmmakers are not quite good enough and they turn it into something that's not very good, well, you could still, depending on the film, depending on if it's at least visually good or whatever, you can still use that as a way to get people to read the script as well. I don't know. But that's the journey. That's the process. How do we know anything? How do we know a producer is going to be what they say they are? We don't. We have to do our due diligence, do the best we can to figure that out and take the best chance. Pause Film says, have you ever thought of creating a workshop for the business side of the screenplays? As YouTube is oversaturated with screenplay directing, editing, tutorials, but almost nothing on the business side. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of what I'm going to incorporate into this. I do that in the Weekend Screenwriting Workshop. We have a whole thing on the strategy and business side of it, and business is woven into the way I teach this stuff. So there sort of is there a little bit already. But yeah, we'll dig deeper into a lot of that stuff as we go. Sweet Idiot says, I remember George Clooney saying once, you can't make a good movie out of a bad script, you can make a bad movie out of a good script. George Clooney said that, but that's been a quote that has been around for a very, very, very long time. So yes, that's 100% true. What advice can you give about rewriting an old movie? What are some things important to watch out for, do avoid? So we're getting towards my hard deadline cutoff time. Real quickly, I'll just say, be careful with rewriting old stuff. Somebody still has rights to that. You do not have the right to create a new version of, a remake of something. The person who owns those rights has the right to do that. So you could possibly reach out to them to try to get those rights, depending on if you're, that kind of person. Generally, I recommend trying to create original stuff. It's going to teach you the skills better, and it's all yours. So, trying to rewrite or remake old movies is, you might do it as an exercise, but I certainly wouldn't do it as a way to try to break in. Let's see. If a director and producer makes a mess of a screenplay, that's not good, though. Would that not close doors? Don't you get thirsty? Don't you get thirsty? I'm very thirsty. And in fact, I may actually use this opportunity to wind this thing down. Yeah, if somebody makes a mess of your screenplay, that I don't know that would necessarily close doors for the writer. It's probably going to close doors for the director, but for the writer, people in the industry understand that a screenplay can be made a mess of, and also you can get the benefit of somebody taking a weak screenplay and turning it into an amazing film. So it works both ways. Again, if you're worried too much about making that first impression or creating something that opens all the doors and does everything you need it to do, you're not thinking strategically necessarily about the project, about the industry, about your career. So my belief is we need to develop the skills. We need to get good at this as a craft, and then we need to weave that into a strategy for building a career out of it. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. Tell us your idea for a horror film that was just too horrifying. No way. Not a chance. I didn't make it back then. I'm certainly not telling it now. And if you don't know what that's in reference to, then you'll have to look at either the first or second episode. I can't remember which one it was. You can watch them back on double speed just to sort of get through. I know it's a lot of time to watch all these things. So those of you who have joined us, you were here the whole time. Thank you so much for joining us. I do have to close down because this is supposed to go 2 to 4. Maybe push it to 5, but we're 10 past 5 now as I'm looking at the clock. So I do have to close this out. But thank you so much for joining us. If this is something that you want to be a part of ongoing, this is going to be every Thursday at 2 p.m. Los Angeles time. Next week we're going to do another one like this. Hopefully I'll have all the cutaways and all the cool stuff, and we'll start actually doing more like a real show rather than just a talking head the whole time. And then we'll skip a week, and then we'll come back with like deep dives into the different aspects of the show. So if you are not already subscribed, please make sure to subscribe. Click the little bell so you get notified of upcoming stuff. If you don't know me, this is your first time here, you don't know much about what's on my channel, have a look around. I've been making videos here for 7 or 8 years now, and there's some really good stuff on here. Writer's Block Instant Cure is the one that gets the most views and the most likes. It will cure your writer's block in 5 minutes, guaranteed. Other than that, if you want to support the channel and you want to sort of get up to speed quickly, the weekend screenwriting workshop is I genuinely believe the best and quickest way to really make sure you don't have any gaps in your knowledge. So check out weekendscreenwriting.com. And if you want the step-by-step guide that takes you all the way through the entire process, it's a process-based approach to screenplay development. That is, I believe, much more powerful, and once it becomes intuitive, once you learn the process and it becomes a part of your creative intuition, it becomes super fast, and you're able to actually develop in that developing for production environment. So the films that I will be making with writers are going to be with writers who complete the fast screenplay process. Not because I'm trying to exclude anybody, and we may open it up to other people, so don't reject me on that basis. But it's simply because there are like 200 or 300 skills that we develop through this process. It's a year-long program. As you go through that process and develop these skills, you're developing them intuitively as you go through the process. So we're not stopping to specifically develop a skill. We're simply going through the process and developing the skills as we go through. So it becomes a very intuitive, very instinctive way of writing that you can combine with every other approach you've ever done. When you get to the end, if you've completed it as instructed, you'll qualify for the writer's room, which is where we're going to take writers who, in theory, have all these skills now, and we're going to put them in a room. We're going to all write a project, and we're going to select one or more of those projects and go out and physically produce them so that you can see the difference between the idea, turning it into a screenplay, and getting that screenplay into 3D and actually making it into a film. So if you're interested in that, there's a 10-day free start. You can see how it works. Don't think if you're an intermediate or advanced level writer, it's going to feel simple because we start at the very beginning, but the first 10 days are just about helping you understand how the system works. So that 10-day free start will help you understand how the system works. If you like how it works, it gets more and more challenging as it goes through, so that by the end of it, you legitimately have pro-level skills. It is challenging. It does become quite difficult as it goes along, but only if you overthink it. And so in the process, we overcome a lot of the innate challenges to the screenwriting process. So that's fastscreenplay.com. Check that out. If you can join us, if you want to join us for that. And again, every dollar that comes in goes right back into building and expanding all this stuff so that we can take all this further, give you more. This show, we're going to do deep dives into each of those topics, and then I'm going to take the show and I'm going to turn that into a resource that becomes like a definitive resource on that topic. So we'll grow and expand it after the show. So that will turn into a resource as well as we go along. And you'll be able to cherry pick which ones you want and just dig into the details as you like. So hopefully that will be good and beneficial for you as well. I need a team to help me do all this. The team can sort of only come if the resources come in with which to pay that team. So it would be great if you could join me. But of course, there's no obligation. So I'm here to help you regardless if you join me financially or not. And I legitimately want to help you get to where you're trying to go. So any questions, you can always email me at help@fastscreenplay.com or help@essentialscreenwriting.com. Either way, I'll get it all. And I respond to any comments that come up. I usually respond in detail, so if you have any questions, you can post them on this live stream replay. You can post them on any of the videos on my channel. Whatever you need, wherever you come up with a question or a thing that you need, just post it on there. I will give you a reply. And if you don't hear anything from me, nudge me, because I definitely will, because I want to help as many writers as possible, because I know where you're at. And I know how to get you where you're trying to go. And I want to help you get there, because if I can help you get there, it helps me get where I'm trying to go too. So that's all we got for today. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Los Angeles time. And in the meantime, get some writing done. Take action. Keep moving forward. We'll get you where we're trying to go. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.